pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Let me make a note that there is an item R3 that was added after the agenda was released, which is discussion regarding deteriorating telephone landline service that came out of the Public Safety Committee, that you want to take note of. Also, I wasn't sure if VDOT would be here for this meeting, as we have a preliminary discussion of the secondary six-year plan. They are, which is great. There's another item on the agenda regarding VDOT. Those are I-5 and 6. Perhaps we could move those to the top of the new business so you can get them freed up and out of here as well. So give that for board members' contemplation.
I'll make a motion we amend the agenda to accommodate those changes.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
So just to be clear, these items I-5 and 6 will just move up above I-1 and 2.
Right, and we need to add R3.
And R3 just needs to be identified as when we adopt the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Now we need to approve the minutes.
In your packet, there are several sets of minutes for consideration. These are all the minutes that are outstanding as of this point in time in my tenure. So it's 3 meetings, work sessions, and then the regular meeting on March 5th.
I'll make a motion we approve those minutes.
All 4 sets?
All 4 sets, yeah.
Okay. I'll second that.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. And we approve the minutes. Next item is public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience who wants to speak, may do so. Just simply raise your hand, direct your comments to the board, and when recognized, you may speak. Jordan, you're first.
I'm Joyce Blair.
Public comment also.
Okay? And I was appalled and shocked when this board failed to appoint the nominee to the Planning Commission nominated by Piedmont District State Supervisor, Mrs. Christine Smith, on the 2-3 vote. Instead, you allowed the Hampton District Supervisor to nominate someone he liked, who was then appointed by the board. A 3-2 vote. This is a direct slap in the face of Mrs. Smith and all the residents of the Piedmont District. As you know, the nominee was recently defeated by Mrs. Smith by the voters of the Piedmont District in a recent election for supervisor. Had the voters wanted him in office, they'd have voted for him for supervisor. Your actions are direct insult to Mrs. Smith, all the women, and the residents of the Piedmont District. You have proven that the good old boy network is still working. and the wishes of the voters do not count. Shame on you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Paul?
Probably don't need the microphone, but I'll turn it on anyway. Test. Paul Philmar, Stonewall Hawthorne District. My public comment today has to deal with the up-and-coming 6-year road plan. Turkey Ridge is on that plan, has been on there for a couple of years, and I'd like to see you keep it on there and keep it moving forward until we can accumulate enough money in there to accomplish it. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak? Yeah.
I'm Eileen Johnson from Piedmont District. I'm speaking today as a citizen, I'm a taxpayer, not a school board member. But when our joint meeting, budget meeting, was canceled with your board because of the weather, I sent each one of you by mail my comments. And this budget, school budget, is really, really, really a budget of needs. We have a lot of good students in this county. And I think that the major thing that the county can give our children is a good education. But first thing, I think every child needs a good home. And the second thing is a good education. And I'll assure you that the schools will see that these children are educated well if it's funded. And I hope that with the comments I have made to you, that you will give them good consideration and hopefully pass it as presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Here you go.
Page Glenny, Jackson District. Members of the board. As the Executive Director of Rappahannock Citizens for Community Empowerment, I would like to announce that RCCE has arranged for the annual FOIA training for county FOIA officers and employees on Wednesday, April 25th, 2018 at 3 p.m. right here in the courthouse. Mr. Alan Gerhardt of the FOIA Council will be conducting the training, and the public is also invited. Space available. More details to follow. As a private citizen, I have the following comments. At your January 27 meeting, I highlighted the need for you to adopt personnel management practices such as position descriptions and periodic evaluations. In November 2017, you established a new human resource position. This last January, Ms. Garden's exit report highlighted many of the same personnel management issues. Although new hires have been handled better, it appears the systemic issues that were identified have made little progress towards resolution. In a recent budget workshop, Mr. Curry commented that personnel management for those employees that work for the constitutional officers was not clear. Establishing personnel management practices is a critical element to employee performance and accountability. It was the lack of accountability that led to the state police investigation. Accountability also ensures that employees are keeping you board members properly informed so that you can make informed decisions. Case in point, at your February board meeting, Mr. Lazinski, I believe it was February, Mr. Lazinski inquired about the status of the state police investigation, to which there was no reply. Now we find out that Mr. Golf had recused himself in October, and the case was transferred to the Culpeper County Commonwealth Attorney. Will this board just accept an employee withholding information? My suggestion and request is to immediately establish the most basic of management practices, a to-do list. Although that seems rudimentary for a $20-some million operation, it appears it is needed to keep things from falling through the cracks and prioritize tasks for your workforce. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? You're loud enough now. You might be.
I'm here because of the ad in the paper for the 199-foot cell tower by CWS, and also because of the article on a paging tower. My understanding is either the paging tower would contain Piedmont Broadband, maybe I'm wrong, but that was my understanding, or the CWS tower would contain the paging equipment, Piedmont Broadband, and anybody else they could bring in as a paying customer. The problem with that is that it is across from Mike and Sue Luthi. If you've attended past hearings, they've been to every hearing. Chris knows them, he's talked to them. Ron knows who I'm talking about. They have grandchildren who live in a house on their property, which would be about 100 feet from the cell tower. They're very upset that it would endanger their property for the future for their grandchildren and their grandchildren's health. And that's why they also oppose the tower at the high school. I personally think the opinion of the property owner should trump over any location picked out by a wireless company that doesn't have the courtesy to ask the people closest if it will bother them. If they object and they've got all their money in that property and all their future, I think they should prevail, and it should go to another location, away from all people, or it shouldn't be erected. I also was told there may be a repeater put on Bell Mountain. That's where I live. Bell is already full of equipment from Piedmont Broadband that is so strong it comes onto our property and halfway up our pastures. It has polluted our pond. I tried talking to Rich Shoemaker about it, and he's never owned a meter, never done a reading, and understands nothing about the radiation. He's just making the money. He locks the people into long-term contracts for 5 years that are self-renewing. And the problem on Fog Mountain is the man's contract ran out, and he won't let him out of it because he's a base station for the rest of the mountain, and all the equipment is up there. Well, all the equipment of being up there, and I have been up there, means he's over-radiated. He's got workmen all the time, chopping down trees, putting up more stuff. It violates his peace of mind, it violates his health, and he has a right to get out of the contract and get it off his property. This is on Fog Mountain, Mr. Maxwell. I did a meter reading up there, so did other people. He is in high radiation. The wireless companies have given such big contributions to our legislators in Richmond and DC that they pretty much get what they want. Apparently, this year, they were given a provision where they didn't even have to come to you guys. They could just slap up a tower, that they don't have to go through hearings. This, I believe, is unconstitutional. I think the Constitution was written to protect the individual homeowner, the individual life. It wasn't written to protect big companies who care so little that they don't even own a meter, and who don't care how much radiation they put out, where they put it, or what they do to people. By the time the people come down with brain cancer, they'll be long gone. They will have made their money. And I just feel it's not required by law, but it's the right thing to do to make sure if anybody is within like a half a mile or a mile of that tower, that they are okay with it, because they're at greatest risk. If they're not, I would find another place, or I would not put it up. The case on Fog Mountain shows the danger of the Piedmont Broadband. It's not as strong as a cell tower, but when you get everybody on the mountain using it, or you put up multiple transmitters, it becomes as dangerous as a cell tower. And it also shows the contempt against, that Mr. Maxwell moved in when he inherited the contract from the previous owner. He never signed it. And when that contract was up, now he's fighting to be allowed out of it. So, the whole thing is unfair. Most of the older people in this room grew up without cell phones and without Wi-Fi. just fine. I was overseas, and every weekend we traveled. My dad was a traveler, in a station wagon, with dogs. We had no cell phones. We had no seatbelts. We went all over Morocco, all over the Middle East, all over Turkey, all over Europe, in this station wagon with no cell phones. We never missed them. We were very self-reliant. We were self-reliant. People are losing that now. They think if they don't have something every second that they can reach somebody on, they can't function. That's not true. We're losing our self-reliance. We're losing our ability to read a book because of the internet. We're losing. There's proof, more than enough proof now, and John McCain is one of them. He has glioma that is only caused by cell phones. Bo Biden, Ted Kennedy, Johnny Cochran had gliomas. If you look up glioma on Google, it is a cell phone-induced brain cancer, very fast-moving, very aggressive. Not only does it cause that, it causes other cancers like cancer of the throat or the face, cataracts, DNA damage, autoimmune disorders, sterility. It makes bees abandon their hive. We need bees for our food. It hurts insects, it hurts trees, it hurts the environment in general. Hardwired, insulated cable and fiber optics emit no radiation, zero, nor do copper landlines. And copper landlines will stay on if the grid goes down. So as much as they demonize that, if the grid goes down in an attack, we have our copper landlines, unless they get rid of them. Other phones, even landline phones, go through cable companies, will go down, fiber will go down. Cell phones, cordless phones, wireless routers, Wi-Fi, wireless handheld devices, GPS in cars, satellites, RFID, all wireless, wireless smart meters, microwave ovens, radar, emit the same sort of radiation. In the military, they put you in a spacesuit if you worked around radar. Why is the public unprotected? Mama's done. Let's see. Ron Maxwell on the top of Fog Mountain has CenturyLink, high-speed internet, cable, and phone. He has a landline phone. He has cable that he can put right in the back of his computers, and he gets everything through CenturyLink. And that's on a mountain with just a few customers. Why can't we do it to every mountain in this county? Why can't we do it with Comcast? Why can't we do it with anybody? Why can't we do something like that? Another thing is that some of the rural electric cooperatives are partnering with the town government to bring in fiber networks to the home, not to the last mile, to the home. DSL, cable, I've got a list of them. They can get better rates because they're a bigger organization. That makes sense to me. For us locally to put in our own network and to get a better rate and to partner with somebody like Rappahannock Electric. There are a lot of people, including Robert Beard in Rappahannock Electric, who are getting very tuned into all this and who don't believe that more wires should go up. These companies, to me, these companies are ignorant. They may not know what they're doing. They may be short-sighted. They may just be greedy. If they do know what they're doing, and I think some people at the top do, that is criminal, if they really do know. And CWS, we've already rejected them twice. They're coming back in. If they put the paging and the broadband, and they get other carriers, can you imagine the strength of that radiation? It's going to be very strong. Plus, they're going to go down on all sides of that mountain, getting rid of trees, serving people. It's going to really, really do damage. Why should we damage our beautiful mountains? We have a choice. We have a choice, you know. The law is on the side of the wireless companies, but what we need is to stand up, and some counties have stood up. And so I'm objecting to the 199-foot tower. If you must have a tower, keep it at the 85 and don't let the broadband on. Just keep it for paging. You know, that's, when you text, you don't use as much radiation as you use in a cell phone. you know. The park doesn't let cell towers in, but they have towers for their rangers, for radios, for emergencies. We should do something like that, if we have to have a tower. Thank you very much. There's a lot of information on this. I've sent Ron some of it, I'll send him more. I've given you in the past information on this, and we don't have to go this route. Don't have to go this route. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil Irwin, Flint Hill. I'd like to thank the board for its letter requesting the Governor of Northern veto the legislation that would have taken away the right of the county to determine the future of its development. As long as Virginia remains a Dillon Rule subscriber, we as an individual and as a local government have a definite responsibility to look out for the actions of the General Assembly, and you did so. Thank you.
Yes.
Patty Hardy, Rappahannock News. I just would like to remind people that the use of the microphones is not, it's not a convenience. I know it can be difficult to use or want to use it sometime, but it's for the integrity of the video that we record and put up online. So I would really like to urge the board to urge speakers to use the microphones, because it just makes the record clearer. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else care to speak? Declare public comment closed.
Any comments from the board?
Yeah, I'll accept comments from the board.
I just wanted to make it clear that my vote about the Planning Commission representative from Piedmont had nothing to do with our new supervisor. And particularly the fact that she's a woman, that had nothing to do with that. It was, strictly based on the fact that I had a vote, and I just felt like that Mr. Junker wasn't the right candidate. That's all. It had nothing to do with Ms. Smith. Thank you.
Anyone else? About our schools. Let's go.
Good afternoon, dear friends at Pantherland. We've been on all week for spring break and today as well for Easter Monday, so our offices are back open tomorrow. But we've been very busy nonetheless. I'll start with accolades for our students. There are quite a few of them. You remember our 3 students who emerged as heroes during that bus incident back in November? Well, they have been chosen as recipients of the American Red Cross Youth Hero Awards. The students, Rosie Ochoa, Mark Guerrero, and Ian Moore, went to Charlottesville over spring break to be interviewed at the CBS 19 network. They traveled to Farmington Country Club on May 3rd in Charlottesville to officially receive the award at the Celebration of Heroes breakfast. Principal Karen Ellis and I will accompany the students to cheer them on. We're very, very proud of them. A signing ceremony was held on March 16th for our senior Josh Bennett, who is committed to play football for Fort Union Military Academy in the fall. We held our Winter Sports Awards on March 14th. There were so many awards given out that night. It lasted a long time, so I'm just going to hit a few notable MVP Coaches Awards for the varsity teams. Richard Lillard and Jordan Rector for varsity boys basketball. Olivia Atkins and Carrington Wayland, MVPs for girls varsity basketball. Logan Woodward and Tatiana Yates for varsity cheer. Jacob Sheffield was the MVP for Scholastic Bowl. Johnny Beard received the MVP award for varsity wrestling, with Jake Sisk receiving the Coaches Award. We're so proud of our student athletes. They work so hard with so many demands on them, and they're just great role models for our younger students. On March 6th, 43 seventh graders participated in the Rappahannock 4-H State Capitol Day. They were able to meet with Delegate Weber and other representatives and tour the Capitol. They also finished off the afternoon at the Science Museum of Virginia. On March 6th, 17 students completed a leadership and career readiness training program through the Groundworks Project. This is an adventure-bound experiential educational program that's made possible through a grant funded by the Ostrom Foundation of New York. The 8-week program took place at Verdun Adventure Bound in Brixeyville. It met once per week on Tuesdays, and the culminating event after all of the skill building was actual interviews by potential employers for the students who participated, followed by some zip lining. You know, after an interview sometimes I want to throw myself down a cliff too. The Rap Tomorrow Read Today program, that's the partnership program between the schools, Headwaters, and library. It's officially launched, so if you know anyone who has children ages birth to 5 years old that would like to receive free reading materials and tips for developing early learning skills, please have them call the school board office or go onto our Facebook page. We have a link there. They can sign up and they'll start receiving information about that. The PATH Foundation has generously given a grant for the program in the amount of $5,250 to help kickstart the program. Other funds are combined between the library, Headwaters, and our CPS. All right, spring events. Oh boy, get your pen ready and your calendars. We have a special ed advisory meeting that will take place on April 5th. This was postponed due to some weather, and that's at 6 p.m. April 5th, and it will be focusing on addressing special needs through active learning and sensory integration. It'll showcase the elementary school's launch of the Action-Based Learning Lab this year, and the Commit to Be Fit team will be there for the presentation. After the presentation, a review of the annual plan for special education flow-through funds will be given to. Prom is this coming Saturday, April 7th, followed by the ever-popular annual prom after prom party, hosted by the RCPS Students Against Destructive Decisions, or SAD. The event will entertain students for the evening after hours till the wee hours of the morning. Yes, I plan to be there too. It's going to be a lot of fun. Excellent prizes, dancing, food, and fellowship. The event is truly made possible by the generosity of this community. Without the donors who give the prizes and the funds to make it happen, it could not. And we, over the past several years, have had about 100% participation in that, keeping our kids off the streets and safe in the schools. The Drama Department's production of the spring musical Chorus Line will take place April 21st at 7 p.m. And also a matinee on April 22nd at 3. Tickets go on sale tomorrow. So you can also contact Mike Myers, the Assistant Drama Director, for purchasing information, or call the schools for that information. Senior banquet is April 29th at 4. SOL testing will begin first week of May. We're already in May with this. Last day of school, May 31st. Graduation on June 1st. And of course, all the supervisors are encouraged to attend graduation. We really appreciate it when you can show up for that. Finally, you have the school board's proposed budget. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to have our joint meeting due to that crazy winter, spring weather. It was strange, but we hope that the ancillary report at least helps shed some light on the reasoning behind a lot of those adjustments and give some background for that information. Personally, I wish we had more concrete information from the government, but April 11th is a date to watch because the governor has declared a special meeting with both chambers, and he is reviving some language from Governor McAuliffe's original budget. I do not anticipate that they will give us back the whole harmless funding at all. However, we may have a shot at what we've been advocating for with the rural school districts with some of the at-risk add-on funding. So if that comes to light, there may be some adjustments that we'll have to talk about. But we've made our best plan with the best information we have at the time, and it's well in advance of anything finalized. But based on what we've noticed at both houses, it appeared that that was the best information going forward. By way of conversation that would have been brought up in our joint meeting, we have a few items for your attention in conversation only at this point, but some urgent needs of the school that are sort of one-time issues. I've been saying the cooling tower is that ticking time bomb the whole time. We think that's probably got maybe a year and a half left on it. And that's a big ticket item that you saw in the capital improvement plan, but not in our operating budget. From estimates that we received, that'd be run around $85,000. Another need is some upgrades to the water filtration system. We've been having a lot of issues with that recently. We just had to, over spring break, replace a collapsed filter media, and that was $7,650 that wasn't anticipated. Let's see, and our bus incident that happened, that bus that rolled, it was totaled, and insurance company gave us $4,500 for that bus. Buses cost $80,000, so that didn't come anywhere close. If you noticed in the fiscal year 19 budget, we didn't have the ability to budget the one per year until after that lease agreement ends after next year, and then we'll be able to purchase one per year. But that bus incident put us, behind. So if there's any way that you can help us out with a bus, that would be fantastic. Or as a conversation, anyway. Be happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Shannon, I remember a conversation back when I was on the school board about whether it was ever feasible for the schools to link into the Spurrierville water treatment facility. And I know it's always been extremely cost prohibitive, to run that far down. Or for that matter, I don't even know if the town of Washington is closer. But I mean, if we're continuing to have these nearly six-figure bills to maintain these lagoons and sand pits and all this other stuff, are we starting to get into the area of looking at that, or is that just really a multi-million-dollar proposition?
We are happy. It's more than we can take on in our budget at all, but in the capital improvement, you will see the increases with our agreement with the county sewer and water that maintains those lagoons and our water treatment systems, but that is certainly something that we can enter into conversation with both boards. That would be kind of looking at a long-term plan, because yes, it would be very, very costly. And the lagoons are handling pretty well for what we have there, so it hasn't been an issue there. It's more with our water filtration treatment system that we've been having a lot of the concern, because there's so many interworking systems, and we have consulting through Rappahannock County Stormwater, but we still have to contract out for anything that goes wrong, so it's quite a bit. It adds up. So
it's the sewer side, not the water side. The water side, not the sewer side. That's
yes, sir.
Causing
the sewer
most
side
of the
we're pretty happy
heartburn.
with.
Yeah.
That's been okay.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We got next item is the treasurer's report. Debbie here.
Ms. Nick provided the typical reports for you, the cash balance sheet, as well as revenues, summary of expenses, and then detailed expenses. As I've reported here recently, financially, we're in very good shape. You can see the ending bank balance in the left column here for the end of March 2018 versus 2017. You're $1 million to the good over that period of time. There's a few things that play into that, including delayed capital expenditures for the radio system for one. But overall, very good situation. Your expenditures on whole are spending out well within target, and revenues are on track. So really no major news to report with the financial report.
All right, I guess the next item then will be accounts payable.
You have in the board packet accounts payable information for both the mid-month March 15th payment for a total of $42,085.94, as well as the payable for today of $248,323.51. Both of those are in the packet. If there are any questions, I'll endeavor to answer.
Any questions, Kelly? At this time, Mr. Chairman. next item?
Need a motion to
Oh,
approve.
that's right, that's right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to pay the authorized payment of the bills for the dates of March 15th in the amount of $42,085.94 and April 2nd for a total of $248,323.51.
I'll second. Have a motion now, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Now, appointments to the Building Appeals Board.
Yeah, this has been an interesting one. We've talked about this the last couple of meetings, that you needed a, you had a vacancy on your Board of Building Appeals. As I dug into it further, identified that in fact you had multiple vacancies on your Board of Building Appeals. I've noted to the board that this is an area where there's some poor record keeping over the last couple of years, and an area that we're focusing on to improve. So it turns out that your existing members, their terms expired, they need to be reappointed if it's the pleasure of the board. And then Mr. Cornell made it known that we were short one member, and Mr. Jim Racer volunteered to fill that term. We also discussed that this group hasn't met in a very long time, and it very rarely meets. There are some restrictions on, from the building code on how the terms need to be scheduled, and that no more than half can expire in a given year. So Mr. Cornell has recommended the terms that are provided in this item, with 2 expiring at the end of December 2019, 1 expiring in 2020, and then 2 expiring in 2021, and then move to 4-year terms once those terms are fulfilled. So if it's the pleasure of the board, a motion to do all of that would be appreciated.
Place this list, Mr. Chairman, in the form of a motion. Second it.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I do want to thank your building official, Rich Cornell, for helping sort through that, as well as Marlena Lee to help us get it straight.
Now, Recreation Facilities Authority.
This vacancy just became known to us just before this meeting, so Jimmy Deal, who many of you know, and is a county employee, serves on this committee, and he tendered his resignation from the committee, so that leaves 1 vacant position. And I've just put it on here for public awareness, and have the board let me know how you would like me to go about advertising or seeking interest. Do you want it out in the paper? Do you want to do something on the website? How would you like to go about doing that? I'm not aware that we have practice or policy on this, and that may just be because I'm new.
I think I have somebody that may be interested. Maybe just post something on the website. I don't know about an ad.
Yeah, I've got 2 people who've shown interest too, so I think we're going to have no problem filling it. And I believe the board will handle more than just 1. There's some vacancies. I'm not sure about that.
My understanding is that, looking at Chapter 47, it's a 9-member board, one of which is the board supervisors member, and I believe we have 7 citizens, 1 board representative, 1 vacancy at this time.
Perhaps we can work out something.
Yeah, so I'll make sure there's a notification on the webpage, and then we'll bring forward any applications. I did include the blank application form in the packet. Anybody who's watching or interested, fill that out, send it to my attention, or a board member, and they can pass it to me, and then I'll compile those for your next meeting.
And hopefully they read the Rappahannock News, that'll be in the newspaper. We're looking for somebody.
Okay, that takes us up to old business, county building committee update, Mr. Frazier, Mr. Lozinski.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, we haven't met since our last meeting, so nothing has been updated, but we have a meeting scheduled for the 16th. Several things to discuss at that point.
I was going to mention this during my report, but I'll go ahead and do it now. The county did hire our new employee, Mr. Jenkins, assistant, maintenance assistant. Shahad Hughes goes by Muda, and he started today. So he's out helping. Ricky started today, and it'll be a great help to us, and we'll be leveraging him up and getting some of this overdue work accomplished.
That's good.
And the next item is the tower site location. Ms. Smith and Mr. Franklin.
Do you want to take the lead, or I can help out?
Whichever.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we met last week, 2 weeks ago now, at the library, and we had a pretty good meeting. We had several people that are in attendance now at that meeting, and we had a representative from CWS Communications to discuss with us, make a small presentation. And I think we have something later on to take a look at, perhaps in a closed session on that. But the ad that Ms. Price alluded to earlier during public comment, they have put an ad in the paper to solicit comments from the community on the possible location on Woodward Road of their tower that they may be making an application for. It's a 199-foot tall tower. And that's, I think, saying a very, very close location to where it was proposed from AT&T about 3-4 years ago. So I guess right now we have maybe two options to discuss, and that's the possibility of a county-owned 85-foot tall tower on private land, or this application, if it moves forward, perhaps look at being on a 199-foot tall tower, but there's no application as of yet for that.
I'm sorry, quick question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is the CWS separate from the 199 on Woodward Road, or is that the same thing?
It's the same thing.
That's the same thing, okay, thank you. People change.
Next item is the Broadband Committee. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Broadband Committee did not meet this month either. However, I want board members to be aware that Mr. Curry and I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with a representative from Chantel, who has completed negotiations with the school and the library on providing fiber. We're going to learn a little bit more about that and come back and make a report to the board. Probably send something out by email, or certainly do it in a public forum or a follow-up meeting. Once the budget session calms down a little bit, I think we'll have to resurrect the conversation we had about a year ago on this Public-Private Partnership Act, and whether or not the board wants to adopt a resolution. That's basically where we are with the CIT's effort right now. They can't go forward with their RFP. It's not advised they go forward with their RFP without Rappahannock County participating in this Public-Private Act, because it restricts the amount of people that would be able to respond. But we'll bring that back for discussion at a future date. The county administrator is looking at that, as well as probably the county attorney at the appropriate time.
Okay.
If I could ask a question, the public-private partnership may preclude somebody from participating in an RFP, or the RFP needs to be written a certain way, depending on whether we have a partner.
Well, the way the CIT works explains it is that their RFP that goes out is best done if we've participated or adopted this PPEA resolution. And Mr. Curry, jump in here because you're probably more versed with this than I am with your experience in Gloucester as to why that's the case.
In general, PPEA allows a more iterative process, and it's closer to a design-build scenario. We're going to design something and bid it out and see what you get. So we don't necessarily have the expertise to know what the best broadband solution would be for the community. Theoretically, the broadband providers, whether it's wireline, wireless, or whatever, are experts in their field, and given an understanding of what the ground conditions are here in the county, they could recommend to us what they feel the best option is, without us going through great detail and what the solution is, or should be, and then giving a price for that. So we would be seeking solutions for a problem that could be very wide-ranging through a PPEA type of RFP, versus saying, we want a widget, tell us how to give us a widget.
So instead of an RFI, we would go straight to an RFP?
It would be an RFP process that would use PPEA, and that includes a preliminary submittal that would be very general. And so you could then select the general idea from those experts saying, well, I think wireless would work in these areas, or wireline would work in those areas. And then you would start to narrow that down in detail as you select a solution. And it could be multiple solutions for different areas. There are pros and cons.
But since we don't, that's the thing, this one kind of confuses me. If we don't have any idea exactly where we're going or what we need, wouldn't we first want to...
So what you could envision it could be as general as, we'd like broadband. And so then with doing that, you could say there are certain assets available in the community to help make that happen. And then the providers who are experts could say, oh, well, given those assets and whether the county's willing to invest dollars or not, or whatever, or anchor institutions, we recommend this approach giving our expertise.
But wouldn't that be a request for information rather than a request for proposal?
I think, mincing words, but the process through PPA is fairly clear to do that. It starts out general and gets more detailed. Now, if you do adopt the PPA policy or resolution, you need to know that you have expertise on staff to help guide you as these packages come in. And so we may have to have a consultant on board, or BCIT may be able to fill this role to help us analyze these packages that come in that may be very complex, and we don't have the internal expertise to know. We would also be positioned to then receive unsolicited proposals at any time from, a PPA. Someone might come in and say, I hear you need a new courthouse, here's my proposal. You have to be prepared to vet that, and then either turn it down or whatever, whether you're interested in the courthouse or not.
If we needed a courthouse, we would put out a request for proposal, RFP.
Well, you probably...
But if we don't know whether we need a courthouse, we would want to request for information because we really do need building space.
Right.
Or office space.
And so for a courthouse or a building or a car, a lot of times you know pretty well what you want. And so you would hire somebody to design that for you. I want a box that's this big.
RFP.
And you would go through an RFP process to hire a professional services company, an architect. They would design plans for you to very specifically decide or show what that building is. Then you would bid that out on a best cost basis. And so when you get into the PPEA, it's this hybrid approach that combines the design and the build out together. Because we don't necessarily know what we want for our community. We want the experts to tell us what would work best for our community.
It kind of reminds me of stopping out here at Tiki Mart and asking somebody, asking what's the best way to get up into Old Hollow, and they say, how are you going? Walking or driving? You say, driving. They say, that's the best way.
Well, theoretically, we aren't experts in the area of broadband deployment. So there are technologies that we aren't fully aware of, how they would apply to our space. And those experts then can come tell us how the different technologies can help us with our problem. Along the way towards, hopefully, they would, have a cost, financially sustainable program to get it done. You may hear back that it's not viable, you can't do it, can't get there from here.
I'm afraid that's what people think.
Well, there's certain ways to find out.
So you say you can't get there from here?
Well, I hope we can.
Have to go somewhere else first.
You can always get to
Take a few roads to get
Or
there.
a dollar thing gets in the way sometimes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Me as well.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing is Bills Committee, Ron Fraser and myself, and since Ron's done all the work.
Well, unfortunately, board members, we haven't done all the work, but we have made a pretty good stab at it. Mr. Welch and myself met first. We had a couple members of the public there at the library, and then Mr. Welch and myself and Mr. Curry and Mr. Goff met again last Friday evening and worked on it some more, and I think we got a pretty good understanding of what we're going to be bringing forward here shortly.
Yeah, and I'll just add that not knowing where we were going to be in process, there is an item on the agenda later to discuss this. I'm not sure if there'll be any discussion on that, but because we didn't know what would have kicked out of the committee by then.
We didn't have it completely where we needed it to be, I guess, to publicize it.
Okay, the next item is Board Finance Committee, Mr. Fraser.
Well, how did I get so much stuff on
I don't know, but I noticed you didn't have anybody to work with.
here? Well, Mr. Lisinski and myself met on Friday around lunchtime and discussed this. And I think we've got the makings of a proposal to bring back to the board. Again, since we're already mired up in our current budget cycle, there's no point getting in a hurry on this, but I think we want to take a look at rewriting and restructuring the committee with the resolution that was adopted by this board about 2 years ago now. Mr. Lisinski can add to the issues.
I think the conversation is centered around it may be time to do a little bit more, something more in the nature of long-range planning, whether that's 2 years or 5 years. I remember the treasurer saying we really weren't quite ready for that. We weren't ready for prime time, but I think we're getting pretty close. And I think we'll bring back a conversation about something that leaves that more strategic thinking into budget process for future fiscal years. Did I summarize that accurately?
Could you repeat it?
No. I'm only accurate once.
All right, next item is the budget work session, Mr. Curry.
I put this on the agenda just in case the board wanted to talk budget or felt the need to talk budget at this meeting. We have a work session scheduled for Thursday and Friday at the library. It's really just an opportunity for the board. If there's anything you're thinking about that you need to give me a few days to chew on, this would be a good time to do it.
Okay. New business. We go to I-5 and 6.
I-5 is introduction, a preliminary discussion on your secondary 6-year plan, SSYP. As the board, I'm sure, is aware, every year, every spring, the board gets together with the VDOT and holds a public hearing to discuss how secondary dollars should be allocated in the community. Generally, and those are on a 6-year cycle. So generally, every year, that 6th year is free and doesn't have any projects allocated to the dollars for then, because every other project is marched forward 1 year from the previous year. Your draft documentation is in the packet. You have VDOT here, and they brought an updated document with them and hard copy that they can distribute to you. And what we really need to do today is get ourselves prepared for your public hearing that will occur at the next meeting. And to do that, we need to determine which project should be shown and what your priority list should be for those out-year funds. In general, most of your funding is in the unpaid road area. And it's all formula-based, how those funds are provided by the state. We have the opportunity to have VDOT perform hard surfacing of roads, and if projects are under $600,000 or so, they can do it with state forces, which generally means it's more cost efficient than going to an outside contractor. So I think in the past, they've cut projects into chunks to enable them to do that in the most efficient way possible. With that said, that 6th year of your plan, there will be about $250,000 available to allocate to the next project, beyond what's already in your 6-year plan. Some of the projects that may be appropriate, as looking through your unpaid road list and the traffic counts for those, and some of what I've heard from past board meetings, would be Kaiser Run Road, Route 614, another section of Turkey Ridge, this section being from the Culpeper working the other way, under 6-year plan right now, the section of Turkey Ridge all the way to the, I guess it's east, northeast, is on the plan. This would be all the way on the other side of the Culpeper side, adding that section to hard surfacing. And then lastly would be the next section of Rolling Road, which was recently on your plan as well. There are other potential projects, and I put them up on the screen, that have been culled out of the overall list of projects that may be viable to look at. Most important is that we identify a project that we think is appropriate, and then have the public come and speak to you through the public hearing process to confirm that, or let you know that some other project is important. And after that public hearing, then the board will select the project for your 6-year plan, confirm the other projects already on your plan, and then we'll adopt that 6-year plan and move on and do this again next year. I'll certainly take any input. You gentlemen have anything to add to that from VDOT's perspective?
I believe you covered it very well.
Would you be willing to repeat that?
I would, if you'd like. I don't think everybody else would.
We would certainly, very, very cost beneficial to keep them in the state forces, higher equipment scene, rather than to put them.
Do you mind using the microphone? Thank you.
Introduce yourself as well.
Yes, sir. My name is Ben Davis, and I'm an operations engineer for VDOT at the Warrenton Health and Safety Office. Mark Nesbitt couldn't be here today, so anyhow, as Mr. Curry alluded to, us performing them as far as state forces, if the estimate is below $600,000, has proved to be very cost efficient. We recently completed the first section of Rolling Road as well as Mountain Road, both of which we've gotten good criticism for. Turned out to be very good projects. But Mr. Curry, we got that pretty close.
Yeah, I can tell you, rotate this, so it doesn't do much bigger. So, I've listened to and watched a number of your past meetings, and the only road that I recall coming up was Kaiser Run, as it leads to one of the trailheads to the park and has a lot of out-of-town traffic, and I can understand how that would be problematic for some in the area.
Well, that's the one I'm most familiar with. It definitely needs a lot of work.
So, as I noted, what we really need to do is identify what we want to put out for public hearing, and then you will hear the public, and they may come in, hue and cry that some other road is critical, and it could cause you to change your direction. But before I just put something out for public information for public hearing, I want to make sure the board was involved in that process.
So, Mr. Curry, are you asking us to put forward just one alternative right now, or a short list of
I
two
would-
or three? Or
I would-
what is your recommendation?
So I would prefer one to include in the proposed six-year plan, and then a priority list beyond that if there are some that you want to alert the public that are also potentially of consideration. Then they would better know whether they want to come and speak against hard surfacing a road because they'd rather have it gravel. And there are some that would want to do that because you pave a road, or I say pave, you make it hard surface, then people tend to drive faster. So sometimes people like to have it gravel, even though you have to put up with the dust and everything else.
Well, I agree, but I've heard most about is Kaiser Run Road, so that would also echo what I think I heard from Mr. Frazier in putting that on the top of the list for the public to comment. I can appreciate, however, heard Mr. Comore speak to Turkey Ridge.
Yeah, and that is on your current plan,
Right.
the section that's furthest northeast, and so that will be done within the 6-year period. Yeah, but Turkey Ridge is a long road. I drove it, and it would take you many years to do the entire section with the amount of funding you get from the state. And there are some sections, as we discussed, that may not be appropriate because of the narrowness of the road or rock outcrops and whatnot. But to get the more heavily traveled sections is, I think, important. And I believe I heard that the Culpeper side may be getting some treatment coming up, so it would be carrying on that improvement of the Culpeper side.
With that road, the bridge has been recently rebuilt, is that it?
Yes, sir.
But it's still at such an angle that certain things can't cross it. Can a school bus cross the bridge? Can a fire truck cross the bridge?
That's a good question. I imagine a school bus could, but we could look into that to make sure. I don't know if we have any comments from the school board as far as, is there a bus route through there, or?
It turns around before it gets to that bridge.
So you probably know why they built it at that same angle, why they rebuilt it at that same angle?
From what I understand from that bridge replacement, it was a superstructure replacement only, so we would not have changed the abutments to it. It was just a depth replacement.
Just a depth replacement.
Yes, sir.
It's possible that a project could be done to work on the approach sections, though, if it's a radius or geometry issue. Then you get into, rock outcrops, purchasing property, all sorts of potential.
Yeah, it's a pretty difficult situation in that, are there any students that are on the other side of that bridge? So their parents bring them to that side of the bridge to catch the bus?
That's public-private right there. Very social.
You want to bring it up to my house?
Yeah.
Be great on that road.
So,
I'd like to keep Kaiser Run Road on that list, that short list. I'm having traveled it a lot last fall and heard a lot of, from our staff folks that live on that road. I do think it needs to be looked at.
I had somebody in the office the other day that was in for a different matter, and I heard that they lived down the road, and so I, reached out and said, what do you think about that? And they said, absolutely, it needs to be paid. I'm not asking for any action necessarily, I just wanted direction as to what to put in the public hearing ad. So I'll proceed with Kaiser Run, and within the information for the meeting, we'll include some of the same other information so public knows some of the alternatives, so they can come out and speak for or against these projects. If you guys would leave behind the printed packets, that'd be great. The next item on the agenda, sir, is also regarding VDOT, which is I-6. This is an item that was brought to my attention from Ms. Smith. We are taking a tour of her district, and it is related to the narrow bridge on Water Street. And between the width of the bridge and the geometry of the approach, it's apparently very difficult for tractor-trailer traffic to navigate this section of road, which leads to a number of trucks thinking they can navigate it only to stop and then have to back out of that area. I'm not sure if buses can make that turn or if they need to. I think they probably could if they were working towards that. So there is a process through the state that we can, as a locality, work through a public hearing process to have a section of road listed as a through truck restriction or prohibition. And so when we reached out to Mr. Nesbitt, he had his folks look into this, and I included in the packet those items that they came up with in their review to determine whether they thought it would meet the requirements of that process. I believe that it does, and so it occurred to me that given that we're going to have a public hearing related to VDOT matters in May for the secondary 6-year plan, then it made sense to have a public hearing in May for this matter as well. And then you can hear from the public, and they can let you know whether they think it's a good idea or not a good idea to put through truck restriction on this road. Now, being very familiar with through truck restrictions, because we have a major one in Gloucester. If a truck has business along the route, they can still go along that route to a delivery. But if they're in that section, they would need to be able to show that they actually have a destination point or a starting point in that section. And one of the things, and I see the sheriff in the back of the room, one of the things that we would be agreeing to by going through this is that we would have local enforcement. State police would be able to enforce as well, but we would enforce this locally if there was a through truck restriction. So that's something that you'd want to speak to the sheriff about between now and the public hearing to make sure that's not a problem. Not that we have to have a car parked there 24/7 and catch everybody who tries to go through, but if the truck gets hung up, we need to have the wherewithal to go and do what we have to do. So send a message.
Are we talking about only tractor trailers? Are we talking about trucks of a certain length? Or? That's one question I have. The other one is, it says that it's got to meet a couple of criteria, and one of which is it should be 12 dwellings on that street, and I don't think there's 12 there.
Oh, yes, there are. On Water Street, there's many residences on Water Street.
I think if you, on either side of the bridge, the restriction would be from probably one end to the other.
It would be from the bridge to the store, right? Am I on the right road?
It goes from right there at the Estes House on the corner, then you make the right onto Water Street. There's all residences along the right-hand side. And then across the river on the other side is the schoolhouse, and then it goes down to the bridge. So it's residences all through there on the right-hand side. And that's what's happening is the tractor trailers are getting down there, and then they're having to turn around in a residence's driveway. It's very perilous for the people that live there and the structures as well.
Probably we're talking about the before and after coffee shop. It's not that.
No,
Okay,
that's
sorry.
not on Main
Sorry.
Street, down on Water Street.
Okay.
I think a few of us might have been down at that Easter celebration on Saturday, and boy, there was really didn't make sense of how narrow that road, Water Street, really is. And you know how, you can just imagine, I mean, a FedEx truck came down there and just basically got stuck because people parked on both sides of the road. But I realized that notwithstanding, it seemed like a real, but there's a workaround. You can go around 211 and you can.
Well, if it's a through road, what are they doing down there anyway if they're through traffic?
Well, a lot of times they just don't know. So one of the things that this does is post a sign at the beginning and no through trucks, and so that would keep them that there's an issue. And you have to have a reasonable alternative in order to do this.
Right, so is it a GPS situation that the trucks are being turned on there? Because it
Could be.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, I've seen right there in Amosville where they're sending them through a farm.
Unfortunately, Google Maps does not have any truck guiding version. Some of the other programs do have truck routes and whatnot, but Google doesn't, and it's a problem. So I did not prepare a resolution requesting authorization to advertise this public hearing. I don't know that one is necessary, but I definitely didn't want to go forward without it. And Ms. Smith asked about this initially. But I would appreciate a motion to authorize me to go forward with the process to advertise a public hearing for the May meeting if the board is so inclined to move in that direction.
It's Piedmont District.
I'd like to make the motion that we move forward with that for the May meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Okay, authorize sheriff to purchase the patrol vehicle.
No, we're on I-1.
Pardon?
I-1. Which is the roof. Thank you.
On the lower roof. Yeah, there's another one on the sheriff.
Yeah, two sheriff items. Well, one is the lower roof. The lower roof on the sheriff's office that covers dispatch and some offices there has been leaking. It's been a subject that was brought to the building committee or building task force, which is now the building committee. Yeah, there was a bid that went out some time ago and came back and didn't act on that. After I got here, I sat down with Mr. Jenkins and looked through the specifications that we were asking for. And we tightened up the specs a little bit to make sure we had a roof that is appropriate for a building that we would hope to be there forever, rather than something that we're going to have to worry about in another 10 years. So we put that on the street and ultimately received two bids, albeit one came in after the deadline. Fortunately for us, the one that came in after the deadline was not the low bid, so we don't have to work through any worries like that. The low bid is McLaughlin Construction. It's $20,250. Based on your purchasing policy, get used to this someday. Anything over $10,000 needs to come to the board for authorization. So that's where I am right now. I've got a valid bid and a valid contract that I can award for this roof. But I need the board to agree that it's appropriate use of funds. We have those funds in the building maintenance fund they were appropriated for the express purpose of fixing the buildings. So that's where we are. Happy to answer any other questions I can.
These are defects,
I assure you, we do this, we won't talk about it again for a long time.
All right, so I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve this furniture to fix it for the roof replacement for the sheriff's department.
I would second that.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
No, I didn't follow you when you said that.
That was 5-0, right?
Yeah.
And that bid was from McLaughlin, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have any business relationship with them. I've known them for a couple of centuries now.
So is that good?
They're family. Yeah, they're good people. They're not family.
There must be good roofers too.
They did the Amosville work. You see the work there on the Methodist Church? They did, Mr. Lenning's too, I guess. When you drive by it, they did Amosville 10, 15 years ago.
The next item is similar in that it's a purchasing matter, and as I noted, your ordinance requires the board to be involved in the purchases in excess of $10,000. The sheriff is here, so I don't really need to speak for her, but she has in the FY 2018 budget funding for a vehicle, and she's ready to make that purchase. Knew that there was something about the ordinance that required her to come to you, and it would be, well, we don't have a bid per se. There are state contracts available, and she's looking for permission to move forward with that process, and I think it would be appropriate for the board to formally authorize that, and imagine she can answer any questions you may have.
This is new. I mean, the money's already been appropriated and budgeted, so I don't have a problem with it.
And I'll just say, if
I'll put it in
there's,
the form of a motion that we approve this request.
if these are the sort of things you don't want to see in the future, we can figure out a policy around the ordinance to make it clear, but I'm just trying to keep in line with what the ordinance says that you all updated, several months back.
This is one of the changes that was added to the ordinance after the purchase of a few things that should have never been purchased the way they were purchased. And it doesn't make any sense. It was kind of a Band-Aid approach to fix something that we didn't fix to start with. So if that doesn't make any sense, I can go over it again.
I aim to purchase things that intend to be purchased, so.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Can I say something, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing was purchased by me, just for the record.
No.
I want to clear that up. Just want to make that clear. No.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Thank you.
And let's hope we never see the inside of that car.
Anytime you'd like.
I wouldn't mind riding in the front of there now, but I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to drive it.
Just be careful, that's all.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Code 30, Mr. Welch and Mr. Fraser again.
So this is the item I noted that we added to the agenda, not knowing how far along the Rules Committee would be. I don't want to get out in front of the board members on whether they...
No, I appreciate that, but again, we haven't finalized that. We want to bring it before the board and for the public's view on that.
Okay, the next item, updated shared use of public safety system facilities agreement with Condominium.
Interesting name for that agreement. And going through the budget and trying to understand what our cost would be in FY19 with the new radio system in place. This is an item that I dredged up, and it's an agreement that we have with Culpeper to use the tower at their landfill. It was entered into on the first day of November 2008. That agreement includes various cost allocations that total $6,362.52 with an escalator included. So after discussing this with the purchasing director in Culpeper, and recognizing that the new system will be sharing all of the, we already shared our 10% in the capital cost for the new system. So it didn't make sense for us to pay, in my mind, some of the costs that were enumerated on this list. So what we have on that tower that will serve only us is the VHF paging system. Remember, we have a 5-site paging system with 3 towers here and 2 out of the county, one being Culpeper. So in doing that, they've proposed an amendment to this agreement whereby our cost would be a flat $2,350 to use that tower at Culpeper Lane. So I'm seeking your approval to allow me to sign this amended agreement to lower our costs for this contract.
That's kind of a no-brainer.
And before I were to sign this, I'll make sure Mr. Goff approves it as to form. It's pretty simple though.
Should we be concerned that the Director of Procurement for Culpeper County is named Alan Culpeper?
It's interesting.
He's a good guy.
We signed the first one and that was good enough for a while, so.
As I would appreciate a motion to the fact that I'm authorized to execute this. I will point out that Mr. McCarthy executed the earlier version, and if you want, you can note that that's after the attorney approves it as to form.
I'll make a motion to authorize the county administrator to sign this agreement with the Culpeper agreement for the Public Safety Systems Facility Agreement.
One second.
Have a motion and a second.
second?
And that will be reviewed by the county attorney?
Yeah, absolutely.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Here we have the next two items already.
So I think that brings us to J1.
By the way, Mr. Curry, well done on that discussion with Colfax. Yeah, seriously, if you look at that, that was a good point.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
and it's nothing like a budget process to see, what we do, right? So I'm looking at every single line, trying to scratch my head. What was that? Why are we paying that? And then you have to run it down. And I assure you, there are many that I didn't catch, but that's one I did.
Thank you.
We'll get the rest next year. The next item, sir, is the update. So just a short update for you. March was budget for me, and so we've made it through my initial proposal and some subsequent discussion. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to have the joint meeting. I think that is very helpful for the two boards to come together and make sure you understand that budget of needs. I did place at your space the school board's formal request. So you have that now, and as we meet on the 5th and 6th, that's something we'll need to talk about, is the request versus what's in my proposal, and how to handle that, as well as what to advertise for public hearing. I mentioned earlier, our new employee started today. We're excited about that, to get some of that maintenance work underway. I will say that Shannon and I have talked a little bit about potential for there to be some labor sharing potentially in the future to do things more efficiently. So if we could free up our crew occasionally to help them from hiring some consultants, we may be able to save money overall, or some contractors, I should say. So that's something we need to explore. We don't, if we can't get it done right now, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if we can save them from hiring expensive contractors to tighten the light bulb, then that may make some sense. And that now potentially is possible with the additional staffing. Our move to the new building, the upper floor of the visitor center, is complete. Happy to report that the phones actually work. I was not confident that they would work, but our local CenturyLink folks treated us very well and scheduled us and made the cutover very smoothly the day we moved down there. We are behind on the signage. We have two companies that we're talking to on signage, and getting some proposals from each, and then we'll be ready to be moving forward. The cost is pretty low, so I think we'll be able to move forward on that without coming through the board for approval. And there won't be anything elaborate or anything like that. We had a bit of a false start with the emergency services coordinator, deputy emergency management coordinator interviews, and that they were scheduled for the day of the windstorm. So we had to cancel that. They were rescheduled to last Friday. So I spent all day with two board members, the sheriff and others, interviewing candidates. It was a good day, and I believe we have some direction coming out of that, and I'll be moving on that. We have been delinquent for quite some time with a DEQ recycling report for calendar year 2016. Happy to report that that is submitted finally. We had to pull information out of our contractor. Ms. May worked diligently to get that done, and she has. She's also, well, we don't have to submit annually. We submitted 2017 as well, and we are meeting our recycling rate, which is important, because if we don't, then we have to write an involved plan on how we're going to meet that. So I was glad that that was done. Along the same line, and I mentioned to you before, the AFIT grant that was a paperwork nightmare for a long time, that money is now in the bank. So the reporting was done, Ms. May completed that, and we've received the $20,000 already, so that's another good set of news there. I am working with VDOT to find ways to allow them to participate in the removal of the woody debris at the Amosville landfill site. and it may involve a cost share. And it's my thought that the funding from this grant that we finally received, $20,000, could help towards any local share of that overall cost. So I think if we can, I've had positive response so far. I don't want to go any further than that, but I think we can get that issue resolved without costing us a whole lot of money. Or at least I'm hopeful. And then lastly, as we all know, the comprehensive plan is a big task. One of the main tasks that needs to be done is the data tables, graphs, and maps, and getting those updated. I've worked with the Rappahannock Regional Commission and signed an agreement with them for $4,000 to help us update all of those data tables, graphs, and maps. So they are underway, and they will be working back with us. They've got a 60-day, I believe it's a 60-day timeline on it, and they will participate in our planning commission meetings as well to help discuss that information and answer questions and take direction. So that's moving forward, and that was a major stumbling point for us. They've recently done a similar task for Madison, so they know what it takes. So it's good that we are jumping on after them, and I'm confident that we'll be able to deliver. So that's what I have for you today.
We've got information correspondence and report, building report, VDOT report.
In information correspondence, I'll just point out an item provided by Ms. Parker, Director of Social Services, that April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And this flyer, for lack of a better word, is included in the packet that includes some information about Child Abuse Prevention Month. And included in this is there's an event scheduled for Saturday, April 14th from 10 to 2 at the high school gymnasium. It's a community partner outreach day, so I encourage you to take part in that and better understand the issue. Many of us have the privilege of not being directly involved in child abuse or exposed to child abuse, but I assure you that it's all around you, and it's very important for all of us to be cognizant and to be involved where we can and be a positive influence.
Next item on the list is closed meeting.
We have two reports in the document as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Gray, if I could interrupt for a minute, if I could ask for the board's indulgence. I just realized that I forgot to ask for something to be added at the very beginning of the agenda process. Under appointments, the Jackson District Planning Commission position expires in April. And I need to address that, so I'll probably have some names to come in within our next month. I don't know if we need to run an ad for that or whatever.
And I'll just reiterate, Ms. Porras has been going through the table and data that we have and improving it, and our goal is to bring notifications to the board months in advance before these expirations occur, but we're not quite there yet, and it's very unfortunate.
And I knew this as well about this position. The gentleman, member, and I spoke this weekend. I forgot that I had that. So I'll be working on that process, I guess, between now and the next meeting.
Is the individual willing or interested to serve again, or is that?
He's been on 20 years, and you know, he's kind of left it up to me as to whether we want to see if anybody else is interested. There has been some questions about that. So he is willing to serve, but I'm excited about it.
Mr. Chairman, I know in the past we talked about actually advertising when we had a vacancy on something like the Planning Commission or something, getting the word out there, especially if Mr. Brown is thinking about not going another term. So as long as we have enough time to get the word out there, formally rather than just word of mouth. I think that would be best for all concerned.
Well, you have some budget meetings coming up. Well, you could make appointments there, but they're really just the end of this week, so.
I guess some sort of an advertisement.
Yeah, I'm not looking for interviews.
So this would be after the next planning commission meeting, that you would make an appointment.
Yes. Mr. Brown is okay through April.
So if the board is interested in doing an advertisement in the paper, perhaps staff administration could do a quick once-over the appointment list as we understand it, recognizing the fact that meeting minutes are not in great shape, so appointments are not in great shape. If there are other commissions or boards that also will have people coming up, we might be able to just do
one ad for
one ad for
That makes sense. If we, yeah.
Okay. We'll work towards that. Crystal will work towards that.
That's good.
See, we didn't even have to put it on the agenda.
That's right. It's like an hour. Oh, we had Latin minutes.
That would have been an addendum.
There are 2 reports in the packet. One is the standard building permit report, and you can see a total of $187,000 worth of work conducted. I did speak with the building official about rates a little bit, and we can talk about that more on the 5th when he comes to the work session. The other item is the standard VDOT monthly report, really included for your information, no action needed. But you'll have your crack at Mr. Nesbitt at the next meeting during the public hearing, and get your questions ready through that and be available to answer any of those that you may have.
I guess, Mr. Curry, the one thing, and I know I'll keep my powder dry for Mr. Nesbitt, but there's nothing in 2019 under the Rural Rustic Projects and Development. I didn't know if we skipped a year or...
Well, the way if you look at the attachment for the secondary 6-year plan, the projects, some of them have to stack up money for 2 years. And so you may have one that's built up money for a couple years and it's going to go in 2018, and then you have to take the 2019 money and 2020 money to put it together to get enough for that $600,000 for that next project and then on. But then these are just plans, and so as we move forward in that 6 years, things are going to slide around a little bit. They hopefully are going to complete projects for a little bit less than are budgeted, and a little bit will free up, and it may allow projects to shift forward.
Thank you.
So now I believe we are on M.
Right, closed meeting.
I move that the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors conduct a closed meeting in accordance with Section 2.2 through 3711A of the Code of Virginia for the purposes of discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, or of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open body would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. And Section 2.2-3711A, discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, financial interest of the governmental unit would be adversely affected. The subject matter of the closed meeting shall be tower infrastructure siting for public safety systems.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I so move.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Perry.
Aye.
And I also. I'm looking forward to it. No, I just. First item is to,
Sir,
is joint public hearing, we gotta sign in.
we need to certify the coming out of the closed session from earlier.
Do each of you certify that to the best of your knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the above open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board of Supervisors in the closed meeting?
This is a roll call vote. Mr. Purdy. Aye. Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Mrs. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I myself.
All right, sir, now it'd be appropriate for the planning commission to come to order.
Hereby call to order this April 2nd meeting of the Planning Commission for the purposes of the joint public hearing.
And
Roll into the first public hearing. If you'd like, I can introduce the item.
you can read the item, yeah.
Joint public hearing of the Planning Commission to amend Rappahannock County Code Section 139, Planning Commission of Chapter 170 zoning ordinance of Rappahannock County. As you recall, we've had discussion on this item in the past. This is the section of the county code that relates to the terms and appointment requirements for members of the Planning Commission. The board is privileged to appoint members to the Planning Commission, and included in that is a member from BZA and a member of the board itself. Right now, the code states that all terms are for 4 years. The public hearing that was advertised included language to allow that to be amended only for those individuals who serve concurrently with the BZA and the Board of Supervisors, and that is to consider terms less than 4 years. Mr. Goff, you have anything to add to that?
And just check and see, Mr. Curry, when the advertisements were made, whether they were done in accordance with Virginia Code Section 2204.
Yes, sir, they were in fact advertised in the local newspaper, and that information is included in the packet, advertised on the 15th as well as the 22nd, meeting the requirements of the code twice, and with the most recent, the latest one within 21 days, and the most recent one within the last that they filed.
And the Planning Commission's agenda was posted on the listserv and on the courthouse bulletin board and at your office.
Both agendas, both meetings were noticed properly.
Okay.
With that, it'd be appropriate to open the floor public hearing.
I think most of you probably been here enough to know that this is an opportunity, and anybody wants to speak will have it. Opportunity to do so, just raise your hand to be recognized. Please stand up, direct your comments to the board, and I'll declare the public hearing open.
Mr. Chairman, can we request that people come up and use the microphone so that we can properly record their comments?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Anyone caring to speak? Anyone caring to speak?
So it gets past my bedtime here. Tom Junk from Piedmont District. I might as well make people mad starting off with. I hope the 3 supervisors that voted against the Piedmont District Supervisor, which is a woman, if you haven't noticed, I hope they really dislike me rather than trying to prove a point. Because if you dislike me, that's fine. My 12 years experience on the Planning Commission, 3 as chairman, a certified planner, might not qualify me to be on the Planning Commission again. But again, I hope those 3 supervisors voted because they didn't like me, not because they were trying to prove a point. Now I'll get into the rest part of the public, these amendments and things that are going through. it is way too early in this whole process. The whole zoning ordinance needs to be gone over. It needs to be gone over from start to finish. Now that you have a zoning administrator that you're paying to do that, you need to start from the very beginning, go through the ordinance. You need to take it out, as we did in the past, to each one of the districts. Piedmont, take in information. It might not be doing what it's supposed to be doing. I think it's way too early to get into these kind of piecemeal ordinances that you're going to do or trying to do. First of all, they need to go out to the public, take on public comment. Each supervisor's, each planning commission's district needs to do that. Second of all, then you can develop a comprehensive plan. Once you've gone through the ordinance, make sure it's doing exactly what you want it to do, what the people of the Rappahannock County wanted to do. For the zoning administrator and the people on the zoning board, you really need to go out to each one of, if you're doing a bed and breakfast, you need to go out and visit each one of the properties. If some of the planning commission members can't do that, but the zoning administrator, you need to visit each one. You build confidence in people if you say, oh, they had a dog I heard barking. They know you've done something more than sit on your tails, and you at least put some effort in that. The other thing, I'm very disturbed if I go to a planning commission meeting or a board of supervisors meeting and they're opening up their packet for the very first time. You need to get planners and zoners that really want to do the job, not only for themselves, for Rappahannock County. We're not controlled by realtors, farmers, we're controlled by people of Rappahannock County. I think the last voting thing in the Piedmont District had a lot to do with that. And I thank you very much. And thank you for making me only come out once instead of twice.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak? Anyone else?
Damaris Miller, Hampton District. Now I think it's on. Damaris Miller, Hampton District. I am glad you did have this joint meeting in the evening. It is so much easier for citizens to come. It is easier for me than for so many of the citizens to come to meetings. When I had children and was working full-time and had all of those other issues, it was very difficult to get to meetings. And I have the luxury of coming any time of day, but not everybody does. And I can schedule around these things. So many people can't. And I'm so glad that you decided to have this together at night when more people could participate and listen to what's going on. My second comment is simply I do hope that we will really get serious and get busy on revising the comprehensive plan. It is vital, and it is so far out of date. And you keep talking about all the changes in our demographics, the change in the world, the change in everything. Yes, there are changes, and that's precisely why we need a revision of our comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else care to speak? Anyone else? Declare the public hearing closed.
Sir, at this point in time, it would be appropriate for the Planning Commission to consider the matter before the bodies and make a recommendation if they deem one appropriate.
Gentleman, lady, maybe you start at this end, see if the matter before us is just the part of the revision with respect to the membership, right?
Yes, right, 139-1.c.
1C. So, any comments?
I think this clears up some confusion that we actually saw at our meeting 2 weeks ago and helps to clarify what I think was the intent.
I think it does too. I don't have any issue with the way it's written.
Mr. Byrd?
From my point of view, I think the existing ordinance is proper. I don't feel that there's any problem with changing it. And the only detail that needs to be dealt with is that if the 4-year term is kept for the supervisor and BZA representative, it needs to coincide with the term that that particular person has.
Thank you. And Mr. Benning, first of all, welcome to your first Planning Commission meeting. Do you have any thoughts on this matter?
My concern was that traditionally the BZA's organizational meeting was after the Board of Supervisors organizational meeting. And if the appointment ends on the 1st of January, the last of December, then potentially there's a BZA member not present because he hasn't been appointed yet by the Board of Supervisors. Because the BZA doesn't have their organizational meeting until after the Board of Supervisors typically would appoint somebody. So if that clarity is brought up and dealt with, I think it would be fine.
Thank you, Mr. Benning. I'm just looking quickly, I think you raise a point that hadn't occurred to me, but it's not immediately obvious. There's a wording change that you might
Paragraph
suggest.
1, at least the newspaper, it says the zoning appeal shall serve until the next first annual regular meeting. So that's the Board of Supervisors annual meeting, first meeting of the January year. But zoning doesn't, and if they're still making a recommendation of who they'd like to see on planning, they're 3 weeks later.
Just for clarity, I did place the wording, proposed wording on the screens. Hopefully that'll help some. Add in one sentence to paragraph number 2. And I'd be happy to speak to this concern and how I've seen it done in other places. And that is that in the calendar year, the BZA would then be taking action at the December meeting, making a recommendation to the board to consider at the Board of Supervisors January meeting, their organizational meeting, and then the Board of Supervisors can take action on a recommendation made in December. So that would allow, when the Planning Commission is seated, that member who is appointed by the board in January could join.
And that solution would require a change that would be supported by...
That's a practice, and to make sure that when it comes to November and December, that the Planning Commission is thinking about that. And what recommendation to the Board of Supervisors they'd like to forward.
It would be the BZA.
Or the BZA, sorry, yeah.
Because the BZA would have to change their rules of procedure.
They very well may.
So that's
And that's, of course, within their ability to do so independent of the Board of Supervisors.
right. So I don't know why we would want the planning commission talking about that.
They're just concerned that would they know who the BZA rep is at their January meeting? So they just have to start that process in December. At the Planning Commission's January meeting, we'll have a BZA member appointed by the Board of Supervisors at the Board of Supervisors January meeting. To make that happen, the BZA will have had to make a recommendation at their December.
Yeah, that hasn't been a problem. Nobody's been concerned about that for 40 years or more. But what we have is the BZA, in order to do that, would have to amend their rules of procedure.
I suggest that they take that up between now and December.
That's a suggestion.
Is this a joint discussion between both?
It can be.
Just out of curiosity, Rappahannock has somewhat of a hybrid situation here where you got three groups serving on one board. You got the supervisors, the BZA, and the planning commission all mixed up here on the planning commission, which I guess is not typical in most of the surrounding areas, where, you simply have, each supervisor appoints a planning commission member for 4 years, and that's the body. And I would just, anybody know how you created this beast?
Sometime after 86, I don't think it was in effect before then. With the adoption of this current zoning ordinance, I think it's when it started. I could be wrong.
I think you're correct, Mr. President, that in 1966 and the 70s, when we didn't have this scheme, it came out in 86 after Mr. His name just jumped out of my head. Mr. McNear, yes, proposed this, and I think it does date from that 1986 amendment, which was rather sweeping. That's where he created the whole divergence of some applications going to the BZA. Used to be everything went to the BZA, and then some going to the planning commission and then to the board, the special exception part. All dates from 86.
You're right, Al, that half of the counties do not have a representative on the planning commission from the supervisors or the BZA. And those that do have, a lot of those don't have a vote. And the problem with a supervisor or BZA member having a vote at the planning commission level is not just the fact that he has 2 votes. It's the fact also that he is supposed to be representing his board, and he doesn't know what his board's thinking because they're not there, and he's voting for his own self. And and then in the end, those individuals have a vote for the vote that counts when it comes before their board. So I personally question the need to have members of the board of supervisors or the BZA on the planning commission. It's an advisory board to make recommendations. They get their vote when the time comes. And I do recognize the merit of those members taking the information from the planning commission meeting on their individual boards. I understand that. And if that's the case, then they could be a member but not a voting member. They could just be listening, they could ask questions, and then they could take the information back to their board for the actual vote. And so I know what we're here for tonight is to talk about if we're going to have a 1-year term or a 4-year term. I think we've been traditionally doing a 1-year term. We just weren't paying attention to what was written down. And that's fine. But I would personally like to consider not having representatives. And if that doesn't work, consider not having a vote. And I don't think we just need to discuss if we're just going to have a 1-year term or not. So anyway, that's what I was thinking.
If you follow down that same path of reasoning about whether a supervisor should have a vote, you have the BZA member who's appointed by the circuit court judge, who is there for judicial interpretation, basically the final layer before you actually go to circuit court on an issue. So I would think that a BZA member on a subject should be probably very objective and non-biased, neutral, and non-opinionated in his position as BZA. But when you put him on the planning commission with the vote, it's hard to have that same outlook and position on the planning commission that you would have on the BZA itself. It's kind of similar to putting a federal judge into Congress to vote. So there's an equal amount of, I don't know what it's conflict, but issue there too to think about.
So you see the merit of not having a BZA member on the planning commission? And that makes sense. And what about supervisor?
I'm not a supervisor.
I know that you have an opinion and you're on the
But
planning commission.
I think, you know, if it's about taking information and communicating back with the board, I think there's multiple avenues to communicate between the county administrator, the zoning administrator, you know, the video recordings that we now have that, you know, that we didn't have 30 years ago.
Well, if it's not out of line, I would like to hear what each one of you all have to think on the subject, because you're the ones that experience it at that level.
So since I haven't spoken, I'll comment. I think there certainly has merit, a couple of things I would say with respect to the analogy. The Planning Commission is to be an advisory and really a deliberative body. So to me, the value of having the BZA rep or the supervisor rep is not so much to bring or convey information to those bodies, but to make sure that the discussion that ensues by this deliberative body is a robust one. So I don't see it as quite analogous to a judge in Congress, because we are not a legislative body, we're a deliberative body. But that being said, I don't have any objection to it. I think the practical challenge would be that we might want to take a closer look at how we come up with a quorum designation as a planning commission. You know, one of the things that we need to deal with is, I don't believe we have formal bylaws, the planning commission, so that's something we'll be taking on. The concern there being, if you have a body of 5, the planning commission has had challenges at times getting a quorum. I would be concerned about a lot of this discussion taking place just among three people. So I think that is probably behind some of the logic originally of expanding this body, because again, it's supposed to be more of a discussion body. But other than those sort of minor points, I don't have any objection to whatever you guys choose to do, but I would say there is some other slight differences. Would you like to respond?
Personally, I don't think I feel like I have been on the commission long enough and that we've had enough meetings to kind of see how it plays out. I tend to agree with Mr. Henry in that it's typically standard either 5 or 7 depending on the jurisdiction. And there are, in the decision making and what you're charged with, I think there could be some conflicts.
Mr. Bird, would you like to comment?
All of the ideas floated so far seem to have a certain amount of validity to them. And it would seem to me that the critical thing is to identify what the problem is, if there is a problem. And it would seem to me there are basically 2 particular avenues. One is to not have representatives at all, and the other is to keep doing it the way we are. Mr. Parrish's idea of having a kind of non-voting member, which would, at that point, seem to promote more communication between the different boards or commissions, has some value. The only problem, as I see it, with that is that there is a certain prohibition between at least BZA members meeting and communicating together before the BZA meeting in private because of the lack of transparency and public comment. So that all those are the 3 attitudes that I see. I find at present I don't feel the existing situation has real problems, but I feel that if they, as people, identify that and would like to act accordingly, the other 2 options are quite viable.
Thank you. Mr. Penny?
You know, I haven't seen where there was issues with a member of the BZA or the Board of Supervisors on planning, but I can see where there would be potential conflict of interest or opportunity to weight a particular application in one direction by the BZA or the boss member voting. So I can see both sides of it, but I don't think it's been a problem in the past.
Yeah, I realize that this is not what's on the table for tonight because it's not what's been advertised, but I think it's a unique opportunity to exchange ideas on this, and I'd also be curious what my fellow board members think about those ideas. What do you think, Ron?
It's never been a problem. It's not a dispositive body, so all they do is make recommendations.
Right.
And the code allows you to have from 5 to 15 members. We're talking right now, we've got a maximum of 7, and we have not been able to get the work done. With 7 or more members, you could delegate to, subcommittees of 2 to work on something with staff for the comprehensive plan or the zoning amendments. We've had a situation where everybody in this county, every body, deliberative bodies, whether it's the BZA, the Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, we all fell flat on our face when a certain person retired. And we should not set up a situation like that again. And if you're talking about taking working members off of the body, I don't think it's a good idea.
That's a good point.
I think we need, if we have to, I think it'd be better to have it larger, not smaller. And then they could actually maybe get some of the work done. But it's very hard when you've got whatever it is, 7 members, and you've got issues every week. You got, applications to look at for this, application for that, application for that, and we're all part-time. We rely on full-time people. The full-time people either are no longer here or they were on their way out the door. Work was not getting done.
Right.
And it's not any one person's fault. It's just,
And then what about the idea of voting? Because there are issues, they're not just applications get voted on, there are other things that get voted on.
right, but it's still this positive body. They only make recommendations.
Right.
So I don't see where there's a problem. The only problem, the more bodies you have, the more problem you have with quorum.
Right.
That's the only problem.
John, what do you think?
There's one variable here that I don't know if we've caught, and if anybody here, especially on the Planning Commission, feel free to jump across me if I'm not stating this accurately. But a voting member on the BOS, on the Planning Commission, we have 2 different directions we can go in right now once it comes from the Planning Commission. Go back to us for special exception, or it goes to the BZA for special use. So to say that this board gets a vote or gets a look at everything isn't quite accurate. One representative of the Board of Supervisors does on the Planning Commission with respect to special use permits, obviously recommendation, not binding. So that is really the only, if you want to call it, bite at the apple that this board will get on an issue. And I believe all the tourist home applications fall into that special use permit category. I may be wrong. And so we'll just see the special exceptions. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to resurrect yet another issue, which I've raised earlier about changing our permit process. But if we're going to talk about whether it's 5 or 7 and whether the BZA and the BOS do or don't vote, then we have to think about what's actually being voted on and where it's going. So that's just another variable in this whole thing, not for decision tonight, but whenever it does come up, if it comes up again, to think about that as well.
Christine?
I guess I feel the same way I did last month when this was brought up, was that I don't know why we're discussing it when it hasn't been advertised for discussion. It's not on the agenda. I think we're treading into dangerous territory with very little information and forethought, and if we're going to handle it, we should handle it as a separate item at a different time.
Okay. Any thoughts, Roger?
I'm afraid to say anything now. I think 5 people
may have done a good job up to the 80s, but as things get more complicated as years go by, going to 7 was probably a better idea because 7 lines have to be better than 5. So you have 1 more, 2 more input. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And, all right, there's no problem if a member of the, if the representative from the VOS or the BZA on the planning commission makes a vote, and then when he gets back to his own board, he changes his mind and reverses his vote. There's no problem with that, is there?
I don't think so. I mean, the Code of Virginia allows the appointment of the board member from the supervisory board and also to the BZA. So and I'm sure that they don't come up with these things lightly in Richmond. So I don't see necessarily that there's a conflict or a problem because you may have gained superior information between one meeting and the next.
Right.
Or you may have been lobbied more effectively between one meeting and the next. But, and that's just part of making the sausage, that's.
Okay, well, thank you all for indulging me. This is just something, I wasn't advocating anything one way or the other. I just want some clarity in case something like this came up. I appreciate it.
You certainly don't have many opportunities where the planning commission is sitting with the board, so.
Right, yes, it's a
good
good opportunity for a conversation. Thank you.
Sure. So, I'm sorry, I believe.
I got one more comment. If you're looking for diversity and enrichment of the sausage recipe, and that at some future point, you can always, I guess, consider members at large to increase the board participation. And that may be an avenue that we've never done before, where there are somebody else in a district that would like to serve but doesn't want to step on somebody else's toes that's already serving. That would be valuable to the county.
And you could also do that when you have special situations like now where our zoning ordinances need an update in several areas and the comprehensive plan. As work gets completed, and maybe the at-large members could go back to fishing or whatever, farming, camping.
So, I'm not sure what the procedure is, but in terms of our discussion, I think we're at a stage where what's before us tonight is this language. It may be an interim solution. It sounds like if there's further discussion about how this has worked, it seems like this language has been proposed to deal with the current challenge that's been identified. I guess supervisors are looking to us for a recommendation. I can look to my fellow commissioners if there's anyone who cares to move a recommendation.
I move we recommend approval as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I didn't hear approval.
As written, recommend
Approval
approval as written.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I think we have unanimous decision, recommendation of approval.
Thank you. With a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors, it would be appropriate for additional discussion or motion to approve the document in your packet, which is a resolution that incorporates the changes as written, unless there are modifications to be proposed.
So just to be clear, this indicates that each term will be a 1-year term.
That's correct.
That's correct. This language tracks the language of the organizational meeting resolution. So nothing changed. My sense from the board at the last meeting was you wanted to continue the current then practice that was in conflict with the way that the code was written on the 4-year term.
That's the way we've been doing it anyway. So.
And just to be perfectly clear,
you've been doing this since
it came up.
Can't read the screen, it just adds a sentence. However, members concurrently serving on the Board of Supervisors or the BZA shall serve until at the next first annual regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors, his or her successor is appointed to serve as a representative member.
Right.
If there's no further discussion necessary, I'll put this in the form of a motion.
And that motion is to approve the provided resolution?
Yes, sir.
If I could just ask one more question of Mr. Goff, what will this leave us with going forward for the rest of this year?
I'd like to give you a written opinion about that, because there are a couple of wheels that are turning there that, quite frankly, I haven't made up my mind about. And I'd like to think it through and I would give you a timely answer in the form of an opinion, but I really think I need to consult the books rather heavily before I open my big mouth about that.
I understand. Thank you so much.
Mr. Curry, I was under the impression that that language that you just read would have applied for this year. In other words, everything is in place now until such time that there's an organizational meeting. I mean, we'll keep, if there are, like in the Jackson District and the Piedmont District,
this will become effective.
There are seats coming up, and we would respect that.
It's effective immediately. Of course, it does trigger in the change happens as written, the organizational meeting. So, but the change in the ordinance would happen just after you vote.
Do we have a second so we can discuss this?
I'm sorry, I'll second.
Okay, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I know some of the quantity that Mr. Goff may be in right now. I do not believe the current board supervisor member has been ironed out, because any motion to appoint anybody using this method would have been out of order, so the motion and the vote would have been out of order. So I still think we have a situation where we're not clear who we have representing the board on the Planning Commission. I know Mr. Goff sent out a memo on that, but I asked that same question: how could that vote have been proper if it was out of order with the ordinance? And I have not got an answer to that, and I think that's where the problem is.
Well, I was more concerned with whether the member from the BZA, I don't have any question in my mind that I would stand by the memorandum that I sent earlier, which I know you disagree with.
So if a member of this board makes a motion to do something, whether it's to approve an application or rezoning, and it's in violation of our own ordinance, you do not think that could be overturned in court?
Well, the difference is that if you can have a 4-year term, but a person can agree to serve for less than that. And so when someone agrees to serve for less than that, and that time comes, and then sits back and doesn't raise the issue when action after action over years are taken, I think that person would be
I don't think that makes it null and void, because it would not do the same thing with an application if it was a zoning application.
Well, as I told Ms. Smith, I'd like to give an opinion, because I actually have some other thoughts with regard to the BZA member that I would like to iron out myself. But as to my opinion earlier, I haven't heard or read anything that would dissuade me from my conclusion on that particular issue. But I will certainly, and I'm always open to other arguments, but as far as the authorities that I'm familiar with, that it's a very, very, I would say, in layman's terms, a strong presumption of the law when a person takes a commission that has a duration, that it's very hard then to say, well, I fall back onto this other term which is stated in the law. If someone says, okay, I'm going to be president until 2018,
That's not
when I'm going to resign.
That's not germane to the issue. The issue was that if we're appointing members one way and the ordinance reads a certain way, then a motion to do something different would have been out of order. That's my argument.
Well,
the remedy is very easy to fix, and just do it at the very next meeting.
Well, that's what has happened all these years, is at every meeting.
No, I mean, at the very next meeting of this board, we could just reappoint both the planning commission, the BZA rep and a supervisor rep, and then it would be done with. But to fall back on a mixture of two different things and say one is one is the other, I don't think it's proper to have made a motion and have a vote when it does not line up with our own ordinance.
Well, and that's a discussion, I think, that's separate from what's happening here.
It is.
Okay. And that's what I told Ms. Smith, is that I wanted to, with respect to the BZA member, I want to look at that more closely. I think there's an extra layer of complication there, that's, in my view, not present with the Board of Supervisors member. Now, I'll be glad to look at that too and render an opinion. But I think that's a step beyond what we're trying to do here.
Well, no, I'm just saying that I think we really do need to address that, because if it was a zoning application and this board made a vote, a motion and a vote, and it was in opposition to our own ordinance, it would not be proper. It could be overturned.
I hear you.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's kind of a Ronald Reagan moment here. There you go again. I mean, we have one member of the board that disagrees with the county attorney on an opinion that they have rendered, which this board has asked for, dated March 1st.
No, this
excuse me, sir, I have the floor. Which clearly lays out his opinion that Mr. Parrish is the legitimate planning commission representative as appointed by this board. Now, I can appreciate and I do respect that there may be other members at this table who don't necessarily buy into that, but I don't think it makes any sense for us to reinvent the wheel here and ask our county attorney to go back and look at this again, because he's already rendered a decision on this. BZA no, BOS yes. So, again, we're just going down that rabbit hole of getting into these fights here where we've got one member who disagrees with the opinions of the county attorney and perhaps doesn't represent the majority in his opinion.
it doesn't matter. There's plenty of times that this board has been wrong lately when the majority wanted to do something. And, I mean, that's obvious.
No, sir.
So,
I know you and I go around and around about what is opinion and what is fact.
But this,
that's an opinion.
even an attorney general's opinion is just that, it's an opinion if the court does not recognize it. So this is Mr. Goff's opinion, and I respect that. I just disagree with it. And the judge may disagree with it too, if someone were to take it.
The operative word there is may. I mean, we have a county attorney and we rely on him to give us guidance in this, and it is up to this board whether to accept that guidance or not. It is my humble opinion that I believe, I will take the guidance of my county attorney, and I realize that you don't.
And this particular instance, no.
But your opinion shouldn't sway the board any more than anybody else's.
I think we have a motion and a second on the floor. I think it's time to call. Vote.
Yes.
This is a roll call vote. Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
Mrs. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
And Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
And I also. The next item is another.
Thank you. The next is another public hearing regarding amending the zoning ordinance, a joint public hearing with the Planning Commission. This is regarding an item brought forward by Mr. Sharp related to condominium conversions, in that our current code listed the condominium conversion as a use in the use table in section 36 of your zoning ordinance, wherein the state law does not prohibit it, or does not allow us to consider condominium conversion, the ownership model, as a use. Therefore, this public hearing is to amend the ordinance to remove that row from the use table on 36, as well as to add a new section to section 47 of your zoning ordinance, which follows the state language having to do with condominium conversions and how the locality may handle condominium conversions relative to zoning. And that's limited to the existence of non-conforming use at the time of conversion. Mr. Goff, anything to add?
Yes, also too, just to make it easier for someone coming along in the future, under the definition of a condominium, you also add in parentheses at the end, see section 17047M, which refers to the the new proposed language so that someone who was trying to wade through our zoning ordinance would know to look there to see if condominium conversion definition applied to them. And Mr. Hurd is correct that the Code of Virginia doesn't allow the zoning ordinance of a locality to treat the form of ownership, i.e. condominium ownership, as a type of use that can be regulated per se by the local zoning ordinance. And the language that I proposed is taken directly from the Virginia Condominium Act, so that it's clear what does constitute a conversion condominium. And the only reason that's really significant is that one of the exceptions to the Condominium Act is when there is a change of use contemporaneously with conversion to condominium, then that can trigger local zoning ordinance scrutiny, and the locality can require the issuance of a special exception before the project goes forward, or variance as the case may be. And that language is just verbatim right out of the Code of Virginia. Allows the county kind of to preserve its options in the event that there was it's kind of hard to envision the factual scenario where that might happen in Rappahannock County, but nonetheless, I thought it prudent to at least adopt the portion of the Code of Virginia that allowed the locality to have a say when there is a conversion condominium.
So that, Mr. Chair of the Planning Commission, it'd be appropriate for discussion amongst your members and recommendation if one's forthcoming.
Did we not have comments?
Oh, after public hearing. Thank you.
Anyone wishing or caring to speak, please raise your hand, and once recognized, state your name and direct your comments to
The only thing I would say,
Opening public hearing.
open the public hearing.
I'm Alex Sharp, and I brought this forward indirectly. The only thing that I would say is I'm fine with this. If anybody has any questions as you're discussing it, I'm happy to respond. I don't really need to go over it again, I don't think. Is that okay?
Fine. Anyone else here to speak? Anyone else? Declare the public hearing closed. Any discussion, gentlemen?
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a habit.
Yeah, I understand. We're making it up as we go a little bit tonight. I think, gentlemen and ladies, it's now us. I'll start on the other side on this one. Mr. Byrd, do you have any comments or thoughts on this proposal?
I don't see any reason as yet to change from the state ordinance as it is now written. If a reason can be brought forward, I'd love to hear it.
Actually, if I may, before we go on, there was another point of clarification that I think might be useful to everybody here tonight. The markup that we received had some changes that I think are actually not before us tonight. You'll notice, for example, in the provision H, it says neither the BZA nor the board shall not vote on any application. Seeing that earlier today, I thought it seemed out of place, and I asked Mr. Goff about it, and I since learned that that is not a matter before us, that the only matter that's been advertised and is before us is the addition of section M and the revision to the reference to the 47N. And I suppose the striking of the use from the miscellaneous use table would also be before us, but I did want to clarify, perhaps Mr. Goff, you can do a better job than I have of which of the markups here are precisely.
I've placed on the screen a copy of the ad, which very clearly identifies the changes. Roman numeral I, removing the row of condominium conversion from 17036, Roman 2, adding a new paragraph M to 170-47, and then 3, modifying the definition such that it has the parenthetical reference to 170-47. Yeah, those are the only things that were advertised for public hearing and the only matters before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Light, I do apologize. The strike-through version of the zoning ordinance of Rappahannock County is a document that I share back and forth with the zoning administrator, and it's a working paper, and I simply didn't catch for whatever reason, the knot in there, which would make no sense whatsoever. By the way, because 2204 is the exact opposite. So why there's a knot there, your guess is as good as mine, but it matters not.
I understand, and I know we went through that. I just wanted to make sure that the people discussing it might have looked at this as I did understood that.
Thank you for bringing that to the attention of the public.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. You were going to-
I think we're just bringing our zoning ordinance up to modern expectations. Condominiums are there, and I think a number of other commercial properties might benefit from having this put into our zoning.
Thank you. Mr. Henry?
So what we're basically doing here is that we've taken a form of ownership that we, I guess, previously have not recognized and releasing it and letting it float down over everything else. But
Right.
Interpretation?
Yeah, the Code of Virginia says, look, it's not a use, it's a form of ownership. So like in the case of Mr. Sharp, I believe he's talking about condominium conversion at his factory.
So just thinking about this, exploring it, I can see how it applies to Mr. Sharp's case with the Eileen property. But now it's over all properties, particularly I see it potentially being used in the future in the villages where you may have, for example, as an example only, thinking of something, the public house in Flint Hill that has 5 acres there, that has favorable residential zoning, whereby you could now take that large building and take the density, I guess you look at the density that site is allowed and create that number of dwelling units within that structure now.
Yeah, here's the way to think of it. That if you can do it with a lease, or you can do it with a fee simple interest, you can do it with a condominium interest. If you can't do it with a lease or a fee simple, then you can't do it with a condominium either. So the overlay is the zoning ordinance itself. And the form of ownership is the only issue that is affected by this, not the density or the use. So if in your rural regular village example, if a certain type of use, say tannery, is opposed where it's not permitted, the fact that it's owned in condominium or if it's owned in fee simple is immaterial because the zoning ordinance still prohibits it. But if there is, like an example would be a single family dwelling in village that already has 4 separate units that are being leased to 4 separate people, the fact that the owner wants to condominiumize and change the form of ownership from fee simple - lease to condominium, that's not going to be something that's subject to regulation under our zoning ordinance because it's a form of ownership.
But if the number of units exceeds, the number of leases exceeds the dwelling units that's permitted for that size parcel.
Then it would, then that kicks the zoning ordinance back in.
That's where paragraph M comes in. And basically, the code now implies that a special permit is required anytime you do a condominium conversion in a commercial district. And we can't do that.
So your statement, if you can lease it, you can condo it, is not necessarily true.
Well, it's an oversimplification, but yeah, I mean, if you've got a single family dwelling that's a single family dwelling, and a 3-bedroom septic, and you try to put 8 bedrooms in there, no, that's not gonna work, no matter what the ownership is.
And we would have an issue with it on the zoning, whether it was leased.
Absolutely, yeah, you're gonna look at, so, I mean, if someone were to try to, because you see, the condominium, document has to be recorded. So if it's, you're gonna chop up a single-family dwelling into 8 units when it's not permissible under zoning, that document's gonna get rejected by the zoning administrator, and it's not subject, it's not stamped, it's not gonna be subject to recordation. So, and the condominium attorney who's handling that's gonna know that. There's a whole lot of stuff, asked Mr. Sharp, that the condominium attorney has to do under the Virginia Condominium Act, which is the backstory to us, you know, the state law of what's required to convert to a condominium. And it's rather involved. So the only thing this does is, when we take in this column, the most significant thing that we're doing is to strike the condominium conversion as treating it as a use, because under the code, we just can't do that. That's against state law. We can't say that we can regulate it as if it were used. So that's the most significant thing. But to preserve our options in the event that it is, for whatever reason, burdensome in the form of additional services or what have you, the county does have the right then to step in and try to regulate that issue in the form of fees for services. But here in Rappahannock, we don't collect trash for a fee, and generally we don't have municipal water systems or sewer systems. Don't generally provide, you're not going to get into a situation where you have to provide police substations or those kind of things that you would in a more urban environment. So, but in the case that may ever happen, that's why that I've recommended that we adopt the state law as written to preserve that option. I hope I'm not
I was wondering if I might add something that might help with that, Mr. Chairman.
I think not at this time. I think I'd like to let the commissioners continue to discuss it if we have a question that comes up. Mr. Henry?
I had lots of questions about removing a use and then requiring a special exception, but Mr. Goff's explanation clarified it completely, so I understand.
Wow.
The only...
Sometimes I say something that makes sense.
You almost got me. I still, with respect to the language here, I'm still struggling a little bit with that last provision that allows us to see an application in the event of a non-conforming condominium. Because I guess what triggered this is the shall require a special exception or variance as the case may be. As the case may be implies that somewhere else in the code, one would see whether a variance or a special exception is required. And it's not clear to me, since we've taken this out as a use, how we know which would be appropriate, a variance or a special permit or a special exception. So I get the intent, I'm still not quite sure legally we've nailed that. So could you comment on that?
I find it to be puzzling too. It's a deficiency that's, like I said, in the code of Virginia, and whether that deficiency is the fault of the code drafters or my own education, I can't tell you, because I don't know, as you have pointed out, we don't know what that factual combination or perfect storm would be to trigger whether it's a variance. Generally, I'm going to say that what they're going to intend is variance means variance, that you've got a slightly non-conforming parcel, and then for whatever reason there's a condominium conversion that's going to purport to change the use in some respect, and then it would be treated as if it were a variance. In a case that where you have a conforming lot where the use would be supported under ordinary zoning ordinance, but they're proposing a change that may require a special exception. And remember something, special exception and special use permit in the Code of Virginia mean the exact same thing.
Well, I think the clarity here is that when you get to that conversation, you're talking about a use. And so your table identifies any number of uses. So if somebody has a building and it has an existing non-conforming welding shop, Well, then, when you go through the condominium conversion, if it's existing non-conforming and welding requires a special exception, well, then it's going to be laid out in your table that welding requires a special exception, and therefore you know the process to go through.
But that would be true without the second half of this paragraph, would it not? Because there we are talking about a particular use.
Right, but just because we're going through the condominium conversion process, that is when you get a kick at the can
You
again.
get another look at it.
Whereas if we didn't have that paragraph, you wouldn't necessarily be innate empowered to require them to then jump through that special exception process, already having that existing non-conforming use. So,
And the other thing, this differs from the way it was before. In the other case, there were a few of the districts where it wasn't required. Now, it would be sort of equally treated in any district.
and now it's solely based on the use that is happening underlying, whether that's a welding shop or a florist or commercial or industrial or
Residential density.
whatever. Yeah,
See,
or residential density.
Under the old columns, it requires a special permit in CAR, 5R2, RV, CV. And then in commercial general or highway commercial or industrial or MHP, it is not permitted because there's no designation. Under our code, there has to be a designation of whether it's permitted or not, and it's just not permitted under those categories there. Why that is, that's debatable, I don't know.
Well, and that gets to my other point, which is if we didn't have the second part, you presented the second part as though it gives us another look, but if we didn't have that second part, and we struck that line, then any non-conforming uses would be prohibited.
Any existing non-conforming uses will remain existing non-conforming regardless of the ownership.
Because they're existing.
Right, and so having that paragraph allows you then to say, wait a minute, let's take a look at that existing non-conforming use, and if it's appropriate to go through a special permit or a special exception, now's the time to do it.
Okay, I think that.
And this will come up
pretty
exceedingly rarely,
I hope
possibly once ever.
I've finished, I would entertain a motion from any of my fellow commissioners as to a recommendation regarding this provision.
Make a motion, we approve it as presented.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under unanimous support, recommending approval of the proposed change.
Thank you for working through all that. Hopefully the board doesn't have all the same questions. Basically, just like the last item, there is a resolution in your packet that would allow the board to take the modifications that are proposed through the public hearing ad and as discussed earlier, and incorporate them into ordinance. That includes making a minor modification to the definition in Chapter 8 to add the parenthetical reference to Chapter 47.m, striking one row out of 36 titled condominium conversion, and then adding paragraph M, conversion condominium to 170-47.
Could you read that again?
There you go.
They used to be fun.
That's the fifth time we've heard that today.
That's pretty good.
Plays in all towns.
Ladies and gentlemen, any comments?
The resolution is in board docs.
No comments, Mr. Chairman, but a couple questions that will betray my ignorance. So, I think I just heard as the last part of this discussion that if we don't have a designation here, which I realize we're striking under condominium conversion, but if there isn't a designation there, then it's not a permitted use.
It's not a use at all. It's just a type of ownership. So it's no different than fee simple. So if you're allowed to do it with a fee simple use, then you need to be allowed to do it with a condominium use or ownership.
I guess where I was going is the applicant's property zone industrial?
Well, there is no applicant in this case, but Mr. Sharp, who brought it forward, is commercial general.
Yeah.
And so He has the property all under one ownership right now, and is contemplating splitting that up into multiple ownership through condominium. And so if there are existing uses that don't align with commercial general and permissible uses in commercial general, he may have to go through a special exception process for those uses. And there may be certain conditions that are applied to those during that process to make them appropriate for that location.
So the fact that there is no designation here under commercial general, if I'm saying that correctly, for a condo conversion, has no bearing on
Right,
the
it
issue
should,
before us?
because now the use table will only apply to the appropriate use. For example, if welding were a use in your table and welding is being used at this site, then if welding's allowed in commercial general, then you can do it.
Is any of this, Mr. Goff, is any of this part of, does the term by right come into any part of this conversation here as it relates to what we're doing, or is that, am I off track there? I mean, I realize that we can, you know, if it's a your welding example or your tannering example, I get it. If, you know, we can't do it per another matter in the code, but are we saying that
If a use is by right in whatever zoning district for a fee simple use, then it's also by right for condominium ownership. The use and the densities associated with that use, etc.
But what we're doing here doesn't have any effect on that? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sharpcroft's a good one.
Well, we would entertain a motion if no one has any more questions.
I've just asked that that motion refer to the resolution in the packet, so we make sure we get the wording exactly right.
You just to read this entire resolution here?
You could just move approval of the resolution, including the packet for this item.
Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion to approve the resolution as noted here in the board's package before it.
And I would second that motion.
Motion made and second. Any more discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Mrs. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Aye.
And I also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's your great opportunity now to adjourn your meeting.
I hereby adjourn today's meeting of the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Next item, public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, may do so, please raise your hand and be recognized, state your name. Direct your comments to the board, and declare public comment open. Yes.
Page 20. Page 20, Jackson District. Board members, tonight I would like to discuss the litigation fund disbursement. Right? As you all remember, I've had an issue with this from day one. You may be able to find legal gymnastics to do this, but it sure doesn't look good to the public. In regards to the specific issue in front of us, my first question is Mr. Goff's opinion, I believe, is out of order. Since he is registered on the legal documents as your counsel, I think he's conflicted out. Second issue, if, assuming that is decided, I also requested an opinion from the COIA counsel, got the exact same answer, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an engineer, and English is a second language. But even to me, I can read that 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 allowance to vote requires a majority of the board to be in the issue. A single member can't do it. It's just my English. I'm sorry if I'm an engineer. I really think that, in reality, I think you're going to do it anyway, because you have the votes. What I'm asking for is if you do this, then if Mr. Lizinski loses, if he loses, he needs to refund the county the money. And I think that should be modified in your procedures ordinance for using this fund, that if any county employee is using this fund for defense, which I agree with the concept, but if they lose, why is the public having to pay for them violating the law? So, at a minimum, please put that clause into this that if you're going to fund it, which I hope you don't, but if you're going to do it, then please require refund if it does not come out in Mr. Lizinski's favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else care to speak? Declare public comment closed. Public safety fire and rescue paging system in the western town.
Yes, I put this on the agenda in case there's any discussion that the board wanted to have coming out of our closed session discussion, and I'll leave that in the hands of the board.
Well, I believe that what we should be doing as a board is running the numbers between what a cost comparison between the county putting up a tower on its own dime, turnkey, and what it may cost us if we were able to rent space on another tower. And I think that's very simple. I mean, it's very simple math. It may take us a while to get the numbers, but basically just difference between two different construction projects. One totally funded by the county and one partially funded. I think that's what we have to do. My 2 cents.
Any other comments? Okay, we go to next item, litigation fund disbursement.
So Mr. Lizinski asked that this item be placed on the agenda. Done so, included in the packet background and description relative to the Woolman versus Lizinski case that was partially funded by VML to a point in December. They are no longer funding the case, and there's discussion as to the appropriateness of your litigation fund being used. Did not attach the resolution that was approved by the board for that case. So I had some trouble putting my hands on it, but I did eventually find it from November 2016. I have that for you if you'd like to review it.
Gentlemen, if I may, Mr. Lizinski has asked me for an opinion on the matter of whether he's disqualified and because of his personal interest in the transaction. And it raises a rather interesting point. It is my initial opinion that he is not disqualified as any of the individual board members would be. But I'd like to get affirmation or disputation of my theory of the legal issues involved by simply asking Mr. Pito, who is the Executive Director of the Conflicts of Interest Act Advisory Council in Richmond, to give us a written opinion before proceeding, because as you know, with the Conflicts of Interest Act, the stakes can be rather high. So I would feel remiss as the board's counsel not to suggest that we hold off until such time, which I expect would be rather soon in its forthcoming, of advisory opinion from Mr. Pito. I can tell you the last time I dealt with him, he was a fantastically learned and respectful gentleman and was very, very prompt in issuing his opinion. And I would expect that that would be available to us before the next regular meeting of this board.
What is Mr. Pico's title?
He's the executive director of the Conflicts of Interest Act Advisory Council.
Got it.
It's a mouthful, but that's,
Hold that out.
and I hope I didn't miss something there, but that's the gist of it.
So, Mr. Goff, I mean, is there anything that has made you change, doubt yourself from, or not necessarily doubt yourself, but anything that's made you particularly take a half a step back to
Well, I got
ask for an opinion?
I got an email from Mr. Connick this morning, and reading it, he's, alluded to court action, and before we go down the road of perhaps setting up additional litigation, I thought it prudent to recommend to the board that we seek the additional opinion, which is free. We don't have to pay for it, and that's what they do. And if I've missed something, if I'm wrong, which I admit readily that I may be, then that'll be pointed out to us before inappropriate action may be taken. So it only seems to make better sense to avail ourselves of a free resource such as that body, who is, and this is what they do day in, day out, is decide these types of questions. Us guys out here in the trenches, why, we're shooting at bats and flies and doves and everything else. They just shoot at doves, okay? So they're experts at that. And so I'd like, just before, unless there's some pressing need to go forward tonight, I would suggest a little holdback.
Well, if I could interject here, since you made that last statement, am I to assume that they made a decision in December that they were not going to cover certain things from that point on, and yet we've had the clock running and this board did not approve it?
The clock, if you speak of the clock, what clock are you speaking of?
I'm talking about the legal billing clock in this particular mission.
Oh, well, I know that VML has an issue with paying for the defense in the suit of Woolman versus Lazinski. There's allegations that predate Mr. Lazinski's service on this board, and that relates to the school board service. So obviously they're saying there's no coverage there because he wasn't a member of this insured board.
That's where I have a couple problems there, because
well, and here I'll go one step further to say that I did contact the school board and ask them to forward the Woolman versus Lazinski case to Vacor, who is their insurance carrier. Vacor covered the litigation that involved the school board some 3 or 4 years ago, and they have responded that there may be coverage, but they haven't given anybody a definitive answer on that. And then there's a question about certain of the allegations being outside the scope of our current coverage because they're so, how do I describe it? I'll use the word unusual. The request for relief, i.e. this idea that a special prosecutor could be appointed and those sorts of things. It's not something that is, I don't think anybody could have ever anticipated being pled in a circuit court in a case such as this. So it's outside the ambit VML's position is of what we've contracted them for duty to defend coverage. So that being the case, nonetheless, we've got a member of this board who, by state code, is entitled to representation, and that being the case, the state code empowered the board to create a litigation fund and pay for counsel's bills as they may come due. And then this board passed an ordinance to that effect. So then the question becomes whether Mr. Lazinski himself, being the target of that, has a personal interest such that he's disqualified to vote on. I maintain that there's a provision in FOIA itself which exempts him under subsection E of 3112 that says, hey, just the mere fact that he's a member of the board and a party to the lawsuit of itself doesn't disqualify him. But I'd like some clarification on that, and also the reach of 1520, go a step beyond my prior request to Mr. Pico and really get it fleshed out. And that's why, before acting, okay, before any action is taken, such that we know, okay, we've got reasonable reliance on an opinion not only of the county attorney, but in this case the Commonwealth's attorney, but also of the FOIA counsel.
That brings me back to the point that when I first saw this appear on our agenda, I had two questions, one of which is the same as Mr. Blaney's, is how could you, as Commonwealth attorney, write such an opinion when you're also counsel as county attorney, and you have been paid to represent the same individual?
Because I hold both positions, and I don't see a conflict in making, I don't represent Mr. Lozinski personally in Woolman versus Lozinski.
So what you did in a FOIA case that was the mechanism that initiated the FOIA case.
The FOIA case.
The FOIA case is a direct result of the voting of the FOIA case. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the FOIA case. I haven't.
Well,
there would be no FOIA case if there wasn't a FOIA case.
It's my opinion that I have no conflict of interest whatsoever. So, you know.
But there's the appearance.
Mr. Chairman,
I've got the floor. I've got the floor, sir.
Yeah.
You interrupted me earlier. I have the floor. I've not done yet. That's just one question that I have. I'm just making the point that there is that appearance. And then the second thing I have is under 1520, that doesn't provide, this board is not provided with a mechanism to fund the officers or employees of another political entity, which is the school board.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, ultimately, the school board's budget comes from.
Now, that's a different political entity, though.
Well, I don't know what to tell you about that.
They've got their own insurance policy, they run their own elected officials, and they have their own budget. We do approve the budget, but because we do it by bottom line instead of category, we had no real effect on how they spent the money to start with.
Well.
And it says right in the language, if you'll turn with me just for a minute to 1520, the exact language states that.
What are you referring to?
15.2, 1520, the first paragraph. It's talking about, or other counsel approved by the governing body to defend it, or any member thereof, that's the governing body, or any officer of the locality or political subdivision or employees thereof. That's the governing body, not the school board. So I think that you have several questions that probably need to be asked of the FOIA representative. I do not believe that.
Well, I don't know that the FOIA representative is going to be able to tell us about what any officer of the locality might extend to. Sounds fairly broad to me.
It says, or any trustee or member of any board or commission appointed by the governing body. The school board is no longer appointed by this governing body. They haven't been since 1996.
Well, I didn't say that they were, but and that's a question that really just hasn't occurred to me, other than to say that I have reached out to the school board to see if there is coverage available for Mr. Lozinski through their policy.
That's fine, and that should have been done, but I don't believe that this fund that we created under 1520 even allows for such a thing as to take, I don't see how we can do it for, I don't know, the gentleman that was on the Water and Sewer Authority and stuff. We may be able to insure them because we appoint them, but we don't appoint the school board or their employees. So I think that needs to be resolved as well before we start running the meter and have no knowledge of who pays what.
Well, as far as I know, Mr. Mitchell has been paid by VML up to a certain point. And I understand that there's dispositive motions that are pending before the circuit court from several weeks ago. And it may be that this is all academic, because it could be that the whole case is resolved in one fell swoop. If it's not, then we've got to cross this bridge.
I see. Well, this is kind of important to me, because that's the way I read that, is that we can't even do it if we wanted to.
So, and I don't know. I haven't turned my mind to that question particularly. But anyway, today, I don't know what Mr. Lozinski's motion will be, but it seems to me that we ought to get the additional guidance of FOIA counsel.
I concur with that.
I have no problem with that, but I have to say it does make me nervous to even come to a meeting. Because I've been sued twice for showing up to a meeting and I can't rack my brain if I did anything wrong. I can't figure out what it had been. I don't think that any of us should be subject to paying legal fees that, seem to be frivolous or arbitrary, allegations. And as far as I know, we were threatened with a lawsuit today, and there doesn't seem to be, any end to it. And it just makes me nervous. And so I think, whether I'm sitting here or the next guy is sitting here or the next woman is sitting here, they need to feel protected. If they're going to take on a position like this, they need to feel protected. Otherwise, it'd be pretty hard to find anybody to run for supervisor. And we think this litigation fund is getting low on funds, and I don't know what it is in our new budget, but hopefully it'll be substantial, and hopefully we don't need it. But it just, like I say, makes me uncomfortable just to come to a meeting, frankly, especially if we're going to go in closed session. Because things are alleged that either didn't happen or, completely irrelevant. Anyway, that's what I feel about it. I feel sorry for the taxpayer, but I don't really know how else to approach it.
I think the simplest thing is if we would read the statutes ourselves, we'd save us ourselves a lot of trouble.
I think in light of the complications with the situation today, with perhaps seeking this additional opinion, perhaps having more information from VA Corps, that's the VA Corps that would cover the school, for the school board aspect of things, it may behoove us, in the interest of avoiding further litigation, as I know you've voiced before is in our best interest, Mr. Parrish. If we can afford to wait on this, I don't know if we can afford to wait on this, but that may ultimately be in our best interest today.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I just have I'm the guy that always goes along with the legal advice from my county attorney. So if Mr. Goff is saying that it may be best to get an opinion from Mr. Pito down in Richmond, I'm happy to spare the board the vote here this evening, and just more than happy to see what Mr. Pito has to say about this, and then see where it goes from there. But I'll just remind, in the for what it's worth category, the people in this room and this board, that this COI lawsuit is not a lawsuit that asks for monetary damages or punitive damages. It asks for my resignation. And that is really, I think, the crux of the matter here, and I'll just leave it at that for people to come to their own conclusions as to what the real motivation here is. But I'm willing to, and I trust in the justice system and the legal system, that this will work its way through, including in this opinion from Mr. Pito. And so, Mr. Goff, I yield your recommendation.
Well, I'll expeditiously get the fact pattern out and pose the questions to Mr. Pito by the end of the week.
Do you expect a quick turnaround on this, or are we going to be waiting 2 or 3 months to find out what these?
I don't think so. I will impress upon him that this is a timely matter. I'll speak to him personally and ask him to expedite if it's all possible with his schedule.
Thank you.
So do we have a consensus? We're gonna wait?
Yeah, I think it's prudent to wait. It's interesting what the purposes of these lawsuits are. For example, the first one that Greg came along with was to put an injunction on hiring a county attorney. And that was a year ago, and we've had a county attorney ever since then, but yet that's the purpose of the lawsuit, to prevent us from hiring a county attorney. And, it just seems like a humongous waste of time and effort.
That's not really.
That's not for me to say, I realize that, but I got the mic and I got an opinion and I can express it.
But you said a couple of things tonight that aren't quite accurate. You said you don't know why we got sued. It's obvious what we got sued for. We're being sued for whether or not we conducted business improperly in closed session.
Right. And the purpose of the lawsuit was to put an injunction on hiring a county attorney. That was the last sentence of the lawsuit.
Well, the injunction is also to keep us from doing that, and it appears that we may have done that again.
Well, instead of arguing, let's get a consensus.
Well, I'm trying to talk in generalities, and he's got specific. So, Mr. Chairman, you didn't interrupt him when he was doing it. I'm talking generalities. I'm saying we may have. And it's, anybody that had been here and heard the judge read the statute, I think is pretty plain what we may or may not have done. Again, in generalities.
Can you say generally consensus? We need a vote?
I don't think there's any action to take, sir, so we're on to the next
There's no
item.
motion made, so.
Yeah.
Well, the next item is a discussion regarding holding quarterly public forums. Mrs. Smith.
Last May, we had started, it was last May of 2016, we had started holding quarterly forums in each of the different voting precincts with an eye to helping the public feel more engaged, more heard, and to stay more up to date with the different issues occurring in our voting precincts. And it seemed to be going very well. We seem to have a lot of positive feedback. The last one I think was in your district, Mr. Parrish, when we had it at the fire hall in Stonewall Hawthorne there in Castleton. And I had to sit down with some of the folks in my People's district a few months ago, and there just seems to still be a great interest in less formal meetings in our monthly supervisors meeting. And I didn't know if my fellow supervisors still felt that there was a need for those forums and were interested in taking them up again and initiating a new schedule for them. And I was just hoping for some feedback and possibly action on that this evening.
I think we should go back to it. It stopped because we missed the notice on one that it did not put out properly. Never helped anything more.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had. Sir, I haven't been here, so I'm not sure what you've done. I'll tell you what I've been used to in the past in another locality, and that is that town hall meetings or the like were held and typically hosted by 1 or 2 board members, and therefore were not meetings, and the public knew that no action would be taken. But it was a good opportunity to have that one-on-one dialogue, back and forth, organic conversation, but they didn't have to fear that some action was going to happen because no action could happen.
Well, we didn't advertise for any action happening at any of them, but it was a complete board. At the 2 meetings, we only held 2. We held one in Hampton District over at the Fire Hall. We held one in the Stonewall District at the Fire Hall. The next one was supposed to be for Piedmont District, and it wasn't properly noticed.
Right, as you're aware, once a meeting is properly noticed, and time, date, place, board can modify the agenda to whatever you want.
I understand that, but we've been.
It's just a practice that I've seen in the past. and-
Honorable intentions, we just didn't do it, and I don't see why we would do it, unless there was an emergency.
And it's a burden on staff to have to track those minutes and do everything you have to do to make sure that whatever occurred at the meeting is.
But the thing is, the reason of having all of us, I think, was because people came and they had questions for individual supervisors. You may not be able to make the one in Hampton, but you came to the one Mr. Paris hosted at his fire hall. And again, they may have known if they had a calendar, we did, there wasn't an exact date for each meeting, but I mean, we were doing it 3 months apart, quarterly. So they would have known that they might have been out of town 3 months from now, and they hammer me at his meeting because they're not going to have an opportunity to get me in Amosville.
Well, I'm for that.
Yeah, but then if their schedule changes, they get 2 times,
Staff will do whatever the board, we'll manage whatever the board is interested in doing and just throw out what we did in another lookout.
Why don't we try an informal meeting where all of us can show up and have a dialogue with the public, but not make it in other words, if 3 of us show up, then it is a meeting, right?
Correct.
And it has to be advertised?
Well, if
in minutes and all that stuff?
If you could all be there, but only 2 can be engaged, the other ones would have to be completely silent and not involved. And that's pretty tricky for an elected official.
That sounds like a terrible setup.
What if we just did 2 board members at a time? Then you would be able to, you could have more frequently, and then you wouldn't have all the notice burdens or the minute burdens. It would just be.
Ms. Smith has done a couple by herself. This would be an expansion of that because it would be supported by staff, and staff could help set the location, fire hall, whatever, and get things lined up. But then it just wouldn't have to go through all the process. We probably would advertise it even more through the paper and whatnot, just to try to drive people to come to meetings. Because not everybody wants to go to a dry, boring board meeting, but if they know that they have an opportunity for dialogue, that may increase their interest in going.
I think they were well participating in the public.
Yeah, I know I saw a video from one of them. It was packed rooms.
Yeah, it's pretty good. The Castleton, I don't think Little Washington was quite as, maybe a larger hall.
Yeah, I think there were 80 and showed up. Castleton.
It was a full room for sure.
It might have been the same number of Little Washington, but they can handle a few more, I think.
I mean, it's all about setting expectations as public knows that you're not going to take action or what action you're going to take.
Well, we've done this kind of stuff in the past, and we've respected that our agenda didn't have any business on it other than to answer those questions that we could. I mean, obviously, we don't have an answer for every question that's thrown at you in a meeting like that.
I think one of the really interesting things that came out of the Castleton meeting was there was a lot of feedback from the business community about putting dollars into tourism. And that really allowed us to engage that and look at it in the budget this year and to get feedback from BizRap and encourage that from them. So, I think it's a fruitful exercise. If my colleagues don't find it to be so, I'll continue to do it, as an individual supervisor. But I enjoy the process, and if there's ever interest to reinstitute them, I would be very interested.
And I'll just add that if you do want them to be advertised meetings of the board and you do want them to be on some regular quarterly schedule, then it'd be my recommendation that you go ahead and you add them to your annual calendar of meetings so that they are noticed all at the same time when the rest of your meetings are noticed, and we don't have to worry about missing a notice, and the public will know that, and then we can follow up with more pointed noticing leading up to an event, but only in a situation where there's an inadvertent action and if the notice isn't made within the 3 days or something like that, and then you're having a legal meeting.
Since we've been using fire halls, we have to first clear the date with the fire hall before we can get them to you to notice. Or for the rest of the board to agree on. So I guess we have to figure out what day we can meet and you go find out if XYZ fire department is available tonight.
I just recommend as much time as possible, particularly if you want to get a crowd and go on a drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's
More than 3
doable,
days.
we've been doing it, we just, but the way if you want us to do it 3 to 6, 8 months in advance, 9 months a year, then it's more planning on our part.
Staff will do whatever's necessary to carry forward the wishes of the board, just need to let me know.
Does that mean you're volunteering to go set the whole thing up?
That's what you tell me to do, it's kind of how it works around here. By yours, free.
Good, and the next item on this policy. Deteriorating telephone and landline service.
Well, this is a complaint of mine, and I noticed it was on the, in the minutes of the previous Public Safety Committee, they had discussed the same problem. It seems it's almost countywide, no matter who you talk to, the phones are going out. Whether you're in Old Hollow, you're in Amosville, the phones are going out in Amosville. It has nothing to do with terrain. They're just, the phone lines are breaking down, the cabinets are letting water get in there. It rains, the phones are out for a week. And I hear it's the same thing over on Balderstack and, Flint Hill, so I don't know. And I thought, and I hate to jump in here and go from Smith, but the Public Safety Committee had some letters generated. I read it at this point, but I really think that we ought to move and do something.
And just to pick up on that, it's something I've seen repeated on social media and I've heard about in meetings, that when there's an emergency or when there's inclement weather or a bad rainstorm, people's landlines go out. People's landlines are not reliable, whether they be CenturyLink or Verizon landlines, and they often go out when people need them most. And so it was in the minutes from last year's meeting, contemplating letters to the State Corporation Commission, and so this year we've acted, and Mr. Kandanquist has kindly drafted letters to Senator Irvin Shane, Delegate Weaver, the Virginia State Corporation Commission, CenturyLink, and Verizon, that if we could have all of the board members sign them and mail them out to these individuals and organizations, hopefully start getting some traction, a better support of the landlines in the county. And I would actually like it to be a letter writing drive where every month we generate letters to those individuals trying to get some response and offer to help them pinpoint the areas that are issues in the county to address this problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Christine, and because I know that when there's snow or whatever, I know this school has automatic phone calls. Also know that a lot of people are dropping their landlines for one or two reasons. One's that they all have cell phones now. I mean, some of them, and then you have the cost of that landline, and then also there's so many robocalls. Some of them just got disgusted and dropped them, but I think it's really important to keep it up. And also, I suppose in a county emergency, we
have the code red system that allows us to use the Verizon and CenturyLink database for emergency purposes.
Right, that's wonderful. And then in terms of course, I don't do social media.
And cell phone is opt-in only, so the landline is very important.
Right. And then, what about, do we have a Facebook account for the county?
Definite possibility.
Well, I'm just thinking.
I'm not sure.
That could also be
Yeah, and so
a way to notify the public in emergency.
I do post to Rappahannock occasionally with CDOT or so.
A lot of, I really know very few people that read Rappahannock. And
so there are other ways we can do that.
Facebook maybe would, I presume people tap into that.
In addition to the letters, I can take the bulk, the meat of the letters and come back with a resolution at your next meeting that the board could pass. to put a little meat behind it from a local governing body perspective rather than just one member. You could send a resolution as well to these elected officials.
Sounds good, it's a great idea.
So was it your intent to hand these draft letters off to the board members, allow them to tweak them as they see fit to suit their individual thoughts, or do you want to have Mr. Condenquist make changes after board members provide maybe some feedback, or Mr. Condenquist can provide me the files and then board members can give me independently their feedback on the letter? How do you see this going
With
forward?
just having them available today, I mean, I wish we could get them out as soon as possible. But I would understand what people would want to have some time to look them over before we voted on them. I don't think, there's not another voting opportunity before our regularly scheduled meeting next month?
You meet Thursday and Friday, but that's pretty tight. Now, if each individual board member sent a letter, then it'd be on their own behalf and you wouldn't need a vote of any kind. Now, if you wanted the board to take a position and perhaps have the chair sign a letter, then you would want to very carefully think about that wording. We had the letter that we sent regarding the wireless infrastructure, where you had the general context of the letter from Fauquier, and we were able to tweak that, and the board felt they knew enough about the information to allow the chair to sign that letter. But you saw that probably a week before taking that action, so I would hazard just seeing it today, the board wouldn't be in position to take action.
If I could, perhaps, to expand on that, maybe the board members, if they wanted to, could send a letter individually to our elected official, but an official letter to the SEC and to the phone companies should probably be on a county letterhead, should be accompanied by a resolution. So I think we could do both. We could be, because if we get our elected officials contacting somebody down here, at about the same time that, next month the official letter and the resolution comes in, then it may have a little bit more weight.
I would make, without even reading this, I would make a recommendation that we shorten it drastically when something this long comes. It doesn't, if it's a short letter, they're going to read it right away. They're going to answer or read it right away. If it's a long one, they set it aside and it's never get read. I just think that people tend to read something short and tend to never read something that's long, maybe part of it. So I'm sure that this can be condensed down to something like that, and it would be more effective, in my opinion.
So if you'd like, Ms. Smith and I, maybe Mr. Condenquist can work
I
together
think that's a great idea.
to kind of fine tune the letters
Yeah.
and then look to get a draft out to the board members for your own purposes, and then come back next month with a letter for the group and a resolution.
Because they're aware of the situation. It's obviously the phone company, those copper lines are in the ground. It's horrendously expensive to replace those copper lines. I can understand their reluctance.
We just need to be a squeaky wheel.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, right.
I remember when we had party lines, they were pretty interesting.
If you had party lines, you'd be able to get your neighbor to the phone.
It may be a squeaky wheel thing, because I know if everybody here is familiar with the old Big K radio down in the Baltimore area. I used to live near there, and every time there was a thunderstorm, I'd have Big K on my radio. And people would say, "Why are you yelling in the phone?" I'd say, "I'm trying to talk over the radio," because it would be on my phone. And they'd say, "Well, turn it off." And so I just got tired of it, and I called them up and I told them I was going to keep track of it. I was going to prorate my bill, deduct, divide it up, and whatever. But I was going to send them whatever I thought was fair. And they had a guy out there on Sunday morning, and he said, we think we have it. And from that day forward, I never had any more trouble. We had one serviceman who seemed to know what he was doing or actually cared about repairing the problem, and never had no problem with it.
I think that's what we have around here, one service guy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of telephone.
Well, they may have let him go where he retired. I don't know which.
Okay.
No more business?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second.
And a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.